Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a guest who has been gifting the world orgonite for several years. He has a deep understanding in frequencies and is doing what he can to eliminate harmful frequencies from this place we call Earth. Everybody, welcome Mitch, the Orgone donor, to the show.
Thanks
Welcome,
for.
Mitch. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm just happy to be here, happy to chat about this, and kind of discuss openly one of an extension of the previous conversation we had when we first met. And so, yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. This all happened in such a synchronistic way that you appeared on a podcast that I don't regularly listen to. Somebody mentions on Facebook that I was going to the Guidestones, but this person didn't know that. And she said, I didn't have the dates set yet, I will say that, but we knew we were going to go, my girlfriend and I. And she says, "Hey, you live in Georgia. Have you listened to this? You should check this out. This guy's talking about the Guidestones. Maybe you can go visit." And I was like, my girlfriend and I had been speaking about it for like the previous 2 days. So then we go check it out. My girlfriend listens to it, and I had been interested in Orgonite and Orgone. Uh, just recently, I've come across it, and then all of a sudden, you're talking like 2 weeks ago to somebody about uh, gifting the Earth, well, the Georgia Guidestones, some Orgonite.
Hmm.
So when I heard that, it was just like, whoa, wait a second. So now we met and we spoke on the phone, and we had a very, very interesting conversation. Uh, it was a long conversation too, but it was so good. I was like, hey, Mitch, we gotta do this show together.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm so excited you're here to talk about that. Uh, so, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Like I mentioned to you before, I'm very new to this, where people are like, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." Usually, I feel like I'm just talking to a brick wall on my Instagram and yelling at nobody. But so my name's Mitch, and for the last, I'd say for a solid like about 5 years now, I've been basically gifting orgone devices around the world, or I shouldn't say around the whole world, but primarily in the U.S. And I began back around 2016 doing this in Chicago before moving here to where I am now in Sedona, Arizona. And if for anyone who's not familiar with that, gifting orgonite, a lot of people have heard of orgonite. A lot of people have, I think, a misinterpretation of orgonite, but it is essentially a energy device, a life energy device that some of us are using primarily for the purpose of neutralizing frequencies that are being emitted from things like cell phone towers, the 5G network, the HARP, what we call the HARP frequency fence. I know that a lot of people, it's in the things we'll talk about, it it is much bigger than that. It goes beyond like a physical tech device, that's been established by a government or a government entity. But primarily, orgone devices are used to, you gift them, meaning it is a gift to the earth, typically because it, comes out of the pocket of the person doing the gifting. And what it does is it transmutes a lot of these frequencies. And when you do that, you get some very uh, interesting reactions that have to do with things like the weather, weather modification, geoengineering, things like mind control. And what I would imagine a lot of your listeners are pretty familiar with, or they probably aren't going to scratch their heads too much when they hear some of the concepts, things that things we're relearning, I think, as a species. So that's, I've been doing this now for, like I said, about 5 years. Right now, my main focus is on Arizona. And when we started talking, you kind of caught me in the middle of my project that I'm calling Earth Pipes Across Arizona. Earth pipes are essentially an orgone energy tool. It's a type of orgonite that's encased in type of a metal inside of a metal pipe, and you bury these things around things like high EMF, what I call weapons. Most people would just call them towers. And in addition to that, and these frequency weapons, there's a lot of energy points on the earth that also need to be gifted with these devices, because essentially we live in a frequency bubble. We all know the idea of everything being frequency, vibration, energy. We've all heard the Nikola Tesla quote about everything being a frequency. And that can be a good thing or that can be a bad thing. And so there are forces in this world that are working to make that a bad thing. And then there are those of us that are working to make it a good thing. And so it's just a sort of a modern day, it's an energetic war, essentially, is what it is. It's energetic warfare. And it goes under most people's heads, or under their noses, over their heads, literally in the form of things like, you've heard the word chemtrails and things like that. So yeah, it's essentially that's what I'm working on, trying to reestablish our monsoon season here. A lot of it gets zapped away. When I say zapped away, I mean, with the microwave technology, all of these EMF bubbles, the 5G network that was established or really enhanced during the initial COVID lockdowns. So it's basically, countering all of these things and restoring the rain cycle, restoring the weather. It's essentially georestoration. And so I've just sort of made that my thing. And for people that are familiar with this, they've heard the name Wilhelm Reich. A lot of people, I know, they throw that name around because all of this is sort of, it's come around from Wilhelm Reich, who's the father of orgonomy. While he didn't have a lot to do with orgonite specifically, I mean, orgonite wasn't invented until 50 years, almost 50 years after his time, but it's based on his technology, which people are probably familiar with, or they're getting familiar with, like the what they call the cloud buster, that looked like a big cannon that would shoot up into the sky and agitate the ether, and it would produce rainstorms and things like that. Or the Orgone accumulator box, where people would sit inside of it and they would harness this energy, this life energy. And he would heal people, heal things like cancer and infertility and things like that. And so, the essence behind it is that there is a life force, there is this life energy that passes through everything. And there is something that would like that to not to not be operating properly, and it throws everything off balance. And so one of the things throwing off balance is these towers, and all, I mean, essentially the entire EMF, anything non-native EMF, because I know some people, they kind of forget that, like, the Schumann resonance is an EMF as well. But non-native EMF that's coming off of things like, even down to your earbuds, the cell phone in your pocket, the Wi-Fi router, all these things that they keep trying to get closer and closer and closer to our mind, our body, and soul, that now they're injecting it inside of people. And so yeah, so that's essentially what I'm doing. And I'm just sort of on this mission to restore the rain cycle here in the Southwest, and we're slowly but surely, it's happening. I think it looks like it's actually sprinkling right now. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome that you're doing that for the earth. Right in early on in there, you said most people are using orgonite wrong. How are they
Yeah.
using it wrong?
So what I mean by that, because I'm sure I'll get some flack for it, is living in Sedona, Arizona. I live in what I call the Mecca of the New Age movement. And you cannot go just about anywhere without running into something that someone is calling orgonite. And orgonite is, essentially, it's your mixtures of your composite resins and your metal shavings or your metal powders. It extends beyond that for some folks. A lot of us, we do, you can do different things to enhance tools, and not everybody's making everything the same way. But when it comes to things like gifting around towers, what is essentially the like what I call the dire need for this technology that everyone should be doing, and that is what we call tower busting. Most of it is improperly made, or it doesn't contain enough metal, or there are a lot of really what I would call them inappropriate misconceptions to what these devices are doing, or certain claims are being made. What I've found, there's a lot of infighting, I think, actually in the what we would call the Orgone community, and there's really not a community. It's when you start researching this and you start with something like Wilhelm Reich, and then you learn about folks like the father of the gifting movement. He and his wife, Don and Carol Croft. Don is now the late Don Croft, but sorry, and his wife Carol, excuse me. When you research them and you research people like George Ritschl of Organized Africa, people who've been around gifting and busting towers for, since at least the early 2000s, some earlier than that, when they knew what these towers were doing, you start to get a lot of opinions from people, a lot of different experiences, and those experiences are obviously going to be a lot different with folks. I know where I am, my big thing is, the earth needs help. Right now, there is what they're calling the climate crisis. I think is completely manufactured. I will just say downright it's a hoax and it's fake because it is manufactured. And it needs to be corrected. It can be corrected. It can be corrected actually quite easily. The more people that are what we, like I said, busting towers. But when you have people making devices that say don't have any metal in them, um, I'm not an expert on the metaphysics of crystals, but I know that if you're looking to transmute electromagnetic fields, you need your metal shavings, you need metal powders, or you need your metal component. And what we found through trial and error, and this is a general consensus in the Orgone community, that you need basically a 50-50 composite of your resin to your metal. And if you don't have that, it's, for one thing, it's the most expensive component. A lot of people think it's the crystals, but it's not. It's the metal is, and at least it is in my experience, and the people I talk to, the people I work with, the people that I know who are gifting and busting the most towers and using the most metal and having the most, having the best results. It's expensive. And so I just find, there are a lot of people that they want to kind of, I would say, cash in on the crystal woo woo train, or they want to, hit people with the etherical miracle whip. And uh, it's really just more about, like, I think some people just wanted to, like I said, just cash in on this. And it's very difficult, especially, like I said, where I live, because here we are, we're trying to make it rain. We're trying to bring back our rain cycle and restore the desert. Because if you do your research on Wilhelm Reich, who's sort of he's the reason that this really exists in the first place, at least for what we would call modern day history. It's it's very, in my view, it's insulting to be working so hard and to be doing these things and trying to heal the earth. But then you've got somebody who's like, I get emails all the time from people that are like, hey, Mitch, can you tell me, like, about this piece that I bought in Taos, New Mexico or whatever? And I'm like, sorry, dude, like, there's no metal in it,
Well, so
and
how can you tell if a tower, you're saying that you can do it better? How can you tell uh, if it's done properly or if it's not done? Do you get a reading with an EMF reader?
no, I tell people, like, a lot of this is going to be it's going to be observation. I mean, this is years of observation. And I've, like a few of us out there, we've been, blogging or writing about it for a very long time. A lot of it is reaction, but like in the case of, so there's this consensus that these devices have a range of approximately a quarter of a mile, meaning that they'll react with the tower, or they'll begin some kind of a reaction within about a quarter of a mile. And I found that it was one of our, what we call our gifting adventures, where we're just out and about with, backpacks full of what we call, like, we have the tower busters, which is kind of like a little hockey puck, and
Mhm.
then of course the earth pipes. And we were in Gary, Indiana specifically, and I remember it was a heavy chemtrail day, and there was a lot of this electro smog trying to cover the sun. We call that DOR. Wilhelm Reich called that DOR. It's deadly orgone radiation. And you start to see these reactions where it starts to break up, and like the sun just all of a sudden, like instantaneously, the sun popped out. And so we're looking around and we're like, okay, is there some
So
kind
the
of a
clouds
reaction?
just dissipated?
They almost disintegrate. We would call it transmuting because they're not really clouds, is the thing. They're an energy field. And so there's moisture there, but it's electrosmog. It's positively charged. And so you're going to have your water molecules stick to it. So a lot of the electrosmog that people see that does resemble clouds, there is precipitation there. Like, because I will have people ask, they're like, hey, is this fake? And I'm like, well, fake is sort of a subjective word. It's not fake. It's electrosmog, and there's moisture stuck to it. And technically, as it's clouded together like that, you could, I guess, call it a cloud. I'd call it probably a fake cloud. But when the stuff disintegrates or it starts to transmute, or in the case of the chemtrails, if you go on my website, I have tons of videos on chemtrails breaking down after you bust a bunch of towers within a certain area. You're gonna be able to see it in the sky. You're gonna see those reactions. And what happens is those trails that need those established grids on the ground, they seize and they snap apart. And they almost like DNA helixes spinning around. And then they just start to, sort of like bind to themselves. It's very trippy. I would tell people to go look at the video because it's kind of hard to explain, but they don't plume. They don't do the same, they don't look like smoke. They don't plume out and then they don't cover the sky like they normally would. And so in the case of this particular day that I was mentioning in Gary, we're looking around like, is there something? Because we're carrying at any given time, if we're going on like what I call a mass gifting, we might have like 400 tower busters with us. And the
Oh,
intent is,
wow.
yeah, the intent is like, and this is why, I mean, a lot of people to see certain reactions, it's like, this is work. This is a lot of work. And the people I know who have the best reactions are the ones who are putting in all that work. And it's because once you remove so many of those towers from an equation, you spend a weekend traveling around. And in Chicago specifically, I mean, we used to ride every weekend on our bikes and the trains and in our car and just going everywhere and every burb and up to Wisconsin, took the lakefront all the way down to Indiana, and gridding, just everything. Plus, you've got massive towers like the Sears Tower and the Hancock Building and things like that. You're going to see these reactions. They're going to actually be a lot more prominent, I think,
Do
too.
do you feel it yourself, the energy?
Oh, for sure. Like yeah, when I first started doing this, um, well, actually, just so I'm not like bouncing all over the place, let me finish that thought, I guess.
Okay.
Just in the case of the stuff dissipating or the stuff that was transmuting when we were in Gary, we did find as everything was disappearing, we're like, what's going on? And we must be near something. And then we actually found, I did a video on it. It was 150 of these small cell posts that were cleverly disguised in a ballpark. It was a children's playground, a couple of ballparks, and an army training facility just off on the lakefront. And no, we didn't go to the army facility. We were just moseying through parts where we were allowed to be, but we knew we were within the distance of something. And then once we figured out what had been camouflaged, it was like, holy crap! No wonder there was such a huge sudden reaction. It ended up pouring that day too. And that's not to say orgonite isn't going to make it rain. Orgonite is going to help rebalance the environment and the atmosphere so that it can do what it's supposed to do. So in the case of all the gifting we're doing now in Arizona, it's like our rain was stolen from us for the longest time, and it's coming back, and everything in nature is recalibrating. And so it will, if you're supposed to be dry, if you're having floods, we see for people that are gifting in those areas that are being heavily flooded, it's like the opposite. And we attribute it to essentially this life energy. It's the flow of the natural flow of energy that it's supposed to be. And so anyway, that's how we can tell. Essentially, it's observation. It's a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of time. And there are certain tests you can do. A lot of people have probably heard about the water test, where you can take these devices, like, take a tower buster, you can put it in the freezer, stick a cup of water on top of it, and it will restructure the water. It'll freeze a vortex into the water.
Oh,
Um,
I'm definitely
we
trying this
yeah,
tonight.
we do a plant test. It's so a lot of this stuff, and this is what's I think the most difficult thing to convey to people, is that it's not just about learning about orgonite and playing with the resin and the metal and things like that. It's about like researching all of these different components about a whole plethora of things, and then finding these commonalities. And one example of that is one of the tests that people like to do is called the plant test. You put orgonite around plants, and essentially they'll grow faster, or they may have a larger yield. I know that, a lot like planting during a new moon will actually give you that same.
I gotta stop you right there. Sorry, because
Yeah,
I want to tell my story. I
yeah.
have new grass growing today from putting in. I mean, several new patches of grass from putting in this orgonite yesterday. So
I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, like in my head, I'm thinking like wishful thinking is saying, "Oh yeah, damn right." Um, my guess would be that maybe the potential was there, and there were already
yeah.
there,
So
is something maybe nudged.
So what if yeah, so let
Yeah.
me just set it up for you real quick. So my grass, I had no grass for a while. We put some down this spring and it was rye grass. So it shot up right away. It took like 3 days and it shot up. But when it gets too hot down here in Georgia, it dies off early on. So
Mhm.
it started dying like 3 weeks ago. And then it's been completely dead for like the last week. And I also put in Bermuda about a month after I put in the rye, but it never shot up, like
Mm.
not at all. And then we had a hurricane hit Florida, and uh, it kind of, we got remnants of it for 2 days. It rained pretty bad in some areas. But when I came home from work today, I mean, there's patches of grass all over the place, and they weren't like new Bermuda grass, like
Mhm.
green, like it looks like it's been there for a while, but obviously, you know, there was nothing there, and now it's all lit up. Like, so I just want to say, I put the orgonite in yesterday, and yeah, it could be wishful thinking. It might just be, not uh, say coincidence for lack of
Mhm.
a better word, that it just happened that way. But so I got the home pack yesterday. So just so the audience knows, so Mitch sent me a home pack, and I got it yesterday, and I already had another pack that he sent me for uh, the Guidestones that didn't quite make it there yet, anyway. And yeah, I got
There's
a
still orgonite that made it to the Guidestones. I can say that. So
okay.
yeah, yeah.
uh, so I have that whole pack sitting in the house, and then I'm like, all right, let me go set this up. So, I want to show anyone that's watching the video. You got this little coaster. I mean, this thing is awesome that you sent me. It even has little pegs. Yeah,
So does it, so it stays still when you, because I think I tell people you can, charge water, restructure water with it. So
yeah.
you can put a little pitcher of water on there. So
Okay, yeah. I mean, this
yeah.
thing is awesome. They're such a cool decorations. Then we got, four different colors of these ones. You got what? Yellow, blue, two different blues and a turquoise. So went and put them around the house. A couple of different bedrooms. Put the big one right in the center of the house, and you also sent the regular pucks. So those ones, instead of burying, because it was uh, rather like muddy yesterday. I didn't go bury the pucks. I want to save them for a tower.
Yeah.
I just put them in other rooms in the house. And then I go outside. So it was raining like during the day, but now it's at this time when I'm doing it, it's probably like 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, and it's bright and sunny, clear sky. And I go out back with the long copper uh, rod that you sent, and I put that in the ground, and I walk 20 feet, and it starts lightly raining on me, just like a little drizzle. And I'm like, okay. And the weird part about it is that I'm a conductor of magnetic energy. I used to be someone. I used to fill vending machines, and I used to get shocked up to 200 times, over 200 times a day. I would get the little static shocks, and it was crazy how much I got shocked. But you told me that I would just know where to put these things when I'm burying them, and like I just got led right to an area, and it was like, put it here. And then I went into the opposite end. I had the other one, the silver one. That was aluminum.
Mhm.
Okay, so I had the aluminum one, and I put that in my other hand. So I did the copper with my left hand, and then the aluminum I had with my right hand, and that led me right to out front where I wasn't even thinking of it, but that's where our electrical, the tower's right there,
Yeah.
and everything. So it led me right to a spot, and as soon as I put that one in, I take 20 steps, and I hear a big crash of thunder, and it starts pouring rain. And before I started this process, I was in the house. It took me, what, 5 minutes to go from we were out front picking the package up to set up all the pucks to banging the earth pipe out back to out front. I mean, it must have been a 10-minute tops from it was bright and sunny to all of a sudden it's now cracking thunder and pouring rain. And then I
Mhm.
went and put a final puck in my bathroom right on the window, and I mean it was just like uh, all at once, like a huge clap of thunder, and it sounded like it was right on top of our house, like it was like rolling around, sound like we were at a bowling alley of the gods, and someone was hitting a lot of gutter balls. Like it was intense, and there was a Hurricane Elsa in Florida, and we got remnants of it yesterday. So I mean, it could have just been pulled over or whatever, but it was odd timing. And
Mm.
then on top of it, the new grass that that is here. I would have thought that it would have got drowned out if there was anything there, but there was really nothing there to begin with. So, is that you're saying that it brings back the natural patterns? Could it be that it would move if there's water heavily condensed in a nearby area? Could it somehow shift it?
So we've found that like burying earth pipes, especially if you bury them near water sources,
Yeah,
or
I'm right
near,
next to a lake.
yeah, I mean, this is hearsay, so I'm talking from what I feel. I mean, like you play around with this energy long enough and you're gonna become very intuitive. And I think a lot of people they underestimate, like they see me and they just think like, oh, he plays with the orgonite and that's about it. And it's like, no, I'm much more in tune with Mother Nature than I think most people would give me credit for. What I think happened, and this is because of observations. I mean, I've had in the last month at least 5 or 6 people who have a similar reaction to what you had.
Mm.
They're trying to, who's doing all these agendas and whatnot, they're trying to relocate water to where it's not needed, the moisture that would otherwise fall. If they can concentrate it somewhere and cause havoc, they will. You can look up the tangible stuff with like the Freedom of Information Act. You can find all kinds of stuff on weather modification, the patents, the tests, all those experiments. But once you start doing this work and start, neutralizing the towers and paying attention to the sky, you learn that what's on those papers, this goes so far above that. But in the case of this, like you're saying with the hurricane, I pondered that yesterday when you texted me about the rain, and I thought, I'm wondering if what they were doing was trying to stall energy around the states around Florida, essentially. So, like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, to essentially create almost like a wall that would keep the natural flow from, because the best thing for a hurricane is for it to come in on land and spread out quickly so that only a little bit of it is affected. You don't want it concentrated in one location. And when you look at what they're doing with HARP, you can see how a lot of that energy is harnessed directly to cause as much havoc. And I forget if it's, I think it was I think it's Project Popeye was the name of the one where they were testing hurricanes, and they like wiped out Savannah, Georgia, claiming they were trying to stop a hurricane, or they wanted to learn how to stop a hurricane, but in reality, what they were doing was perfecting how to cause the most destruction.
Do you know when this
And
was?
I think it was like 1947. I want to say about 47. Um, and so yeah, so anyway, what I'm wondering is if when you or anyone else who would hammer a pipe like that in, if it sends out a jolt to this grid that has, maybe not a lot of orgonite around it, or you've jolted something, you've loosened something. And so that as this energy, sort of the negative energy, breaks apart and transmutes, perhaps you opened up, quote unquote, a floodgate that would draw more of that in, so that instead of stalling and trying to, because they obviously, we all know they want to hit Florida, they want to take out all the people who love the freedom and the guns the most, but like they want to like hit Florida as much as possible. And so the more of that, the more open that pathway is further north, or in your case, what, northwest, it's gonna bring that up even further. And what's gonna happen is that moisture is going to benefit more people. It's gonna spread out more evenly. And so I'm just, in my view, I'm thinking, that was my first thought, was what if it was that. I know there are companies that drill things very similar to earth pipes. We have a friend, I can't say the company, but they were having a lot of electrical problems years ago. And the solution to it was to just literally drive a type of copper pipe device, a very large one, into the ground, and then they never had the problem again. And it has something to do with short circuits, power constantly going out, fuses being blown, things like that. And the solution was to draw out. They were in a negative energy spot, but it was, because the universe is electrical. It's all essentially just like pathways that are flowing or they're stopped. And like, this is why I say, like, with this energy, it's life energy, the natural flow of energy. Something wants to stop it, and these tools we can use to open it back up and keep that flow. And so it's, I remember just one quick example of using an earth pipe and having a similar reaction myself when we were in Chicago. It was, I want to say it was June of 2017, I think. I remember watching the forecast, and at this point, we've been gifting quite a bit. We'd extended to the lakefront. We'd gotten most of what I consider, I mean, a lot of Chicago, and then started doing the surrounding suburbs. But it was like 100% chance of rain in the forecast, and it showed that it was going to be over the course of about 8 hours. It was supposed to rain all night. And then I opened up my weather app and I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's gone down. It went down to like 75%. And this is probably around like 5 p.m. It was scheduled to start around, I want to say around 9 o'clock that night. And so I went outside and I moved all of my chem busters, those large, I've got pictures on my website that people can look at. The devices that are based on Wilhelm Reich's cloud buster, that are essentially giant buckets of orgonite with a certain matrix of crystals lined up inside that have copper pipes sticking out. And they kind of look like a bazooka. He called his the space gun, and it rightfully so was. But so I went outside and I started moving all of my toys around, and just keeping an eye on the weather, because you can position these things towards storm cells and you can actually draw them closer to you. But what's interesting is when you do that, pay attention to the sky and watch where all the planes magically appear and the lines begin to form, and all you can hear all these jet engines, you can see the indentations of microwave lines. Whenever the moisture is getting ready to fall, it's like all hands on deck come out to try and fry it and stop it. And so this night, I just remember I continually keep opening up the app, and I was getting very discouraged because I saw that the percentage chance of rain dwindled down literally to 0% by like 8 p.m. And I'm like, they took it. They literally took the rain away. And I was just like, I was pretty pissed. And so I remember I just kind of started really getting into earth pipes and learning from, I think it was George Ritschel, actually, who I highly recommend. Go to Organize Africa and learn a lot more than I could ever tell you. But so I started playing around with earth pipes, and I asked my counterpart, I was like, there's a place in the city that we hadn't gifted that was sort of a military hotspot. And I thought, let's get on our bikes and let's just venture over there. I'm like, something's telling me to bury some pipes. So I think we took maybe like 5 or 6 of these, like I said, they look like this, and a handful of the Tower Buster pucks. And so we ventured out and we got there maybe around like 8:30, 8:45. Went through with a, you do your thing. We call it gifting. We use the word gifting to play it safe. But so we gifted all these things around the perimeter of this place. We got back on our bikes and we started riding back home.
How far
We,
apart did you do these?
these were, I mean, well, so the place because I won't say where it was. The place we went is, it's massive, and it's a massive grassland area that's in the city. Um, I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say it's at least, I don't, I would say it's at least 10 square blocks. No, I would say it's at least like, well, yeah, anywhere between like 7 to 10 square blocks. Um, and there's a water source, 2 water sources. And so anyway, so we go to this place and we space them out. You don't earth pipes, I always tell people 1 per yard. The range on these things, the general consensus is 1/4 of a mile. I didn't really care. I wanted my rain back. So we took a bunch and we put more in than we probably needed to. But we got back on our bikes, and as we were riding home, we were about maybe 5 minutes from home, and I noticed it started sprinkling. And by the time we did get home, we were probably like 6 blocks away. As soon as we pulled up to our house, it was a torrential downpour. And it's time stamped. I had blogged about it because I opened up my app again, and it was now all of a sudden, it was a 100% chance of rain. And it rained for maybe 2, 3 hours. And I remember that night because it was the same night that there was an Illuminati princess named Taylor Swift giving a concert at Soldier Field, which Soldier Field, if you've ever been there, when you're into energy like this, you probably can start to recognize energy conductors and the things, the monuments and the structures they use to manipulate the collective energy of those who go inside and give away their energy within it. But it was the night of this concert, and it was in the newspaper about how it got flooded out. Anyway, I had a good laugh at work about it because some folks there knew about orgonite. They knew what I was working on, and they knew that I was just all about making it rain. And so we got to work Monday morning, and they were just like, "So I'm not pissed, but did you have anything to do with Saturday night?" And I know a lot of it, some people probably roll their eyes and they'd say like, whatever, there's something to it when you have to play around with these things, especially the earth pipes. I tell people because the tower busters are great because they're convenient, and you can gift strategically and kind of more stealth and more quietly, as opposed to when you have to hammer something into the ground, and it takes a little bit more time. But the range on the pipes, what I've found in my work, and I'm finding it all over the desert. I mean, for the last 6 months, I have made hundreds and hundreds of these things, which people can read about. It's like I said, it's my Earth Pipes Across Arizona project. It literally means I'm putting earth pipes all across Arizona. And the reactions you see, it's like eventually you can't deny it. I did this for a year, maybe a year and a half. And I finally, at that point, it was like every time there was a reaction, every time that we saw real clouds again in the beginning. Once we gifted most of Chicago, it was June of, I think, June of 2017. It was super cold, and people were wondering where the hell was summer. And it's like, well, the thing is that the temperature is not actually what you think it is. This planet is not the temperature that they say it is. And when you read things like Wilhelm Reich's work about deserts and how the world's been terraformed, or in this case, we're learning that it's been reset a million times. With all of the terraforming that's going on, it's like, this isn't natural. This is completely induced. And these tools are sort of the counter to that. They shut off the weapons that, or the frequencies from the weapons that are causing these things. And so, you get cooler weather, you get a lot of rain. If I tell people, go, if you can swing it, go make a bunch of tower busters, make some pipes too, and go find a place, map it out, and go bust like 50 towers at a time, and then watch what happens with the weather. And it's like a lot of the times, first you get the drop in temperature, and oftentimes you'll actually get hail too. I don't know enough about I guess you could call it meteorology, but I think meteorology is a pseudoscience because it's entirely based on frequency weapons, and meteorologists are actors who with scripts. Most people don't know that, but they get a script and they don't actually study, like they don't do anything. They just read scripts. But I guess I would say just, it's a lot of it's like unexplainable until you see it. And that's the hardest part about doing a lot of this work.
Right. So
So
you're saying it's become undeniable in your experience. You've been
to where,
living life.
yeah, to where I was finally able to say, like, come on, like, call a spade a spade. Like, you can't keep, because when you're indoctrinated, and this goes to everybody, when you're indoctrinated from the cradle to think that you're insignificant, hurling through a ball a million miles an hour, and there's a billion different versions of you in every reality, and you're so insignificant, you're thinking, what effect could I possibly have on any of this? Until you learn that yes, you can have an effect on all of this, and you can have a very significant effect on all of this. And once you get past that, then yeah, it's easier to see. And it's interesting too, when I hear people complaining about the weather, which happens a lot. I try to remind people your attitude is affecting the environment
Mhm.
around you, and everybody knows this. I mean, not everybody, but you know what I mean. Like anyone who's listening to this,
On a
you're
sunny
like, oh
day,
yeah,
you're more happy.
for sure. You're more in tune with source. Your vibe is higher.
And on a
Um,
rainy day, you feel more depressed. You want to watch TV. You don't want to get off the couch. You're having all these negative thoughts.
Well, it's funny for me. I think I mean, I'm like an absolute joy when it's raining.
Okay.
My number one thing in the world is rain, but it's the energy that encompasses that. It's
Right.
it's funny. There's an old saying about if you get married on a rainy day, statistically, you are less likely to get divorced. And I always wondered about that. My grandparents got married on a rainy day, and I know it's like one example, so you're like rolling your eyes, but it's they were married, I think, for until he passed away, I think 65 years. And I used to joke about it with my grandma. And as I got into this, I was like, I wonder if it could have anything to do with the energy restructuring all of the water and pulling the natural water as it's supposed to from the ether and cleansing the earth and revitalizing everything around, and just the energy of that, because rain is essentially structured water. And so all these tech toys that they make are meant to destroy that. Everything on this planet, it seems, that's considered modern day technology is meant to destructure or kill water. We all know about the consciousness of water and the things you do with this stuff. Like I did this thing recently. I made a bunch of these. This is a charging plate I made recently. I have a thing to hook it up to a frequency generator, and I put some gold leaf in there too. I mean, sometimes you get like more fancy with things. Just everybody has their own thing. Just put enough metal shavings in it, and then do whatever else you want with it. But anyway, you can restructure your water, and the reactions, they're just like Dr. Masaru Emoto's work. So it's like there's a connection to this, and it's like, well, what was he doing? And talking about like the love that you give to this water, and then it has this memory. It's like all that water falling from the sky has a memory too, and it carries information with it. And so
Right. He was the guy that was the Japanese scientist that was saying loving things to
mhm,
plants and then saying hateful things, or to water, right? Not
mhm.
plants. Yeah, and then say hateful
To
things and
both.
then yeah, and oh, to both plants and water.
Mhm.
Okay, and then they would grow accordingly to how they were spoken to. Correct.
Yeah, I mean, he even showed how with one of his tests, it was loving like it was rice and water, and in a cup, rice in a cup of water, and that if everyone was exerting love energy on one, hate energy on another, and no reaction with one. And I don't remember exactly. Go watch. There's a documentary called The Secret of Water. I know he has a book called Secrets of Water, which I assume the documentary is what it was based on. But it's actually on my website under the Orgone Energy tab. There's a drop down box that says the water song. And it's where I learned this water song from a woman who lives here in the area who's everyone around here, it seems like everyone around here knows her. And she goes by the name Hummingbird. And I met her at a water ceremony that at the time, I felt like I was dragged to, but Lynn, I was very thankful that I went. And it was because it involved this song that she taught, and I found that there were certain things I could do with devices. One of them, this is a conversation for probably a future thing. But if you see back there against the door there, that's a 8-foot pole looking thing with the black strap in the middle. Um, there are motions that it's filled with orgonite. It's filled with a certain mix of crystals, and they're all pointed certain directions and coils and things like that. And there are certain motions you can do to essentially pull water from the ether. You can build up rain clouds or you can bust them. And it's a concept I learned a couple years ago now that I don't talk about it on my website because it's hard enough getting people into just tower busting, let alone all of the like weird experimental stuff that you just have to like want to fly by the seat of your pants to do. But it's called ether damming. And I learned it, the US Navy does it to build and destroy storm cells. And there's a gentleman, people can go look it up. I don't know enough about it to talk like an expert on it. I just know what I played around with and reactions I've had doing this water song when I'm doing these different exercises, essentially with these tools. And the reactions are usually there. You get these bursts of energy. You get much harder rainfall, or sometimes it flash freezes and becomes hail. You might build up a thunderstorm, and or like if it looks like it wants to rain for 30 40 minutes, and I'm like, I'm gonna go try that. I'm gonna go outside and do my thing. And after 5 minutes of these rotations you do with these tools, and then you start to see the drops falling to the ground, and you can bust up DOR cells. You can bust up the electrosmog, aiming them certain directions. So it's like there's a million ways to go with all this stuff. I think at the heart of it is the tower busting. Um, so yeah, anyway, sorry, I got on a side tangent about that.
No, that's fine. I actually wanted to say that water is, I've come to learn, is the only thing that's alive in this place. That if it doesn't have water, it doesn't live. It's not a living thing, and that goes for sea life. We think that everything needs oxygen and the sun, but then we find these. Uh, we forget about fish often, and this planet is what 78% of water, and then you go deep, deep into the ocean, and you have these creatures that they have their own light that
Mhm.
attached to them. They don't need the sun. All they really need is water. All anything needs is water because water is the only thing that's alive. That's a conclusion that I've come to.
You know, one of the things I'm learning with my experiments here in the desert, even when it doesn't rain a lot. So like when we we moved here in November of 2018. We brought a U-Haul of primarily orgonite, because I mean it, like I said, I'm a go big or go home kind of a person.
Did
I'm
you
very
move there for this reason?
I we moved to for two reasons. One was the obvious one a lot of people would get, and that is we were in Chicago and we wanted to get the hell out.
Mm.
It was, yeah, I have,
You
yeah.
got out a good time,
We
2018.
got out at a great time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and also at that point, I'd already been gifting around there for about 2 years. We'd put some chem busters around that stayed behind. We'd put plenty of earth pipes, and I knew a few people. They weren't gifting a ton, but there were people that were there that were going to try to keep things going. And, the big thing is that we were having these ridiculous heat waves in the summer. And then all of a sudden it's like I think it was September. See, 2017 was a big year because we did so much gifting in 2016 to 2017. And I think it was by November. And I checked this a couple months ago even, and I think it's still up there. You can find the articles about the foliage in Chicago. It was like Thanksgiving, and it hadn't changed. It hadn't changed yet. Things hadn't begun turning yellow or red or anything like that. It was like there was just all this vegetation, and it was almost like spring. It was like we had spring, then summer, then we were thrown another spring for a while, and then it was of course winter and snow apocalypse. But we I just remember reading about it, and of course everyone comes out and says like, oh, whatever it is, they'll try to flip it and they'll add some negative connotation. Like they'll say, oh, you know what it is? It's human-made climate change. That's what it is. It's destroying the earth. What I think it was that there was a healthier energy bubble over this area of the earth. And because of that, this life energy passing through, I think the life cycle was extended. And I know some people say that, well, that sounds like a stretch, but I would say, come here to the desert and look around at some of the things we know that with we live in a frequency bubble, and a lot of these negative frequencies are roaming the earth or encasing the earth. We used to be bigger, trees used to be bigger, animals used to be bigger, bugs used to be bigger. I mean, there are some, I mean, we were in Costa Rica a few years back, and like we went to this like bug museum, and it was like, good God, the things that used to exist, like a moth. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how the hell? It's like dinosaur, and they're all the bodies too, and I'm like, they looked pretty real to me. And so I'm just like, why was everything always so much bigger? And it's like lifespans were longer. And, in the case around here, we've got some rocks that look like very questionable, I'd say, tree trunks. And so it's like, so what is it about when you have a healthy energy field? And in the case of the orgonite and the plant test, I say it sounds simplistic where it's like, oh yeah, put orgonite around your garden or plant an earth pipe in your garden, it'll make it grow. But I researched something about these other forms of these remains, these ruins, or these what to me look like resets. I think they look like that to a lot of people. And compare that to other
Mm.
things like there's this Russian billionaire. His name is Alexander Golod. That's Golod for anyone that wants to look him up. He is a Russian billionaire who was playing around with some pyramids that he built, one specifically outside Moscow that was, I think, about 150 feet tall. He constructed it out of fiberglass and a few other things, but primarily like these are orgonite materials. If you want to make organ, I mean, that's one of the options is fiberglass resin. And this pyramid was a healing. I mean, people were going inside of it to be healed, but they found that there were all these extinct plants that somehow magically decided to grow around the pyramid, and they couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. And it's hearsay, but when you start comparing these things to just every piece of the puzzle, it's like, okay, so you've got this energy that we know passes through. It's like we know the waveforms, and we know that it's this life energy passes through everything. A lot of people believe it's like quantum related. I think that orgonite is essentially a quantum receiver, or it's a quantum type energy device, or it's multidimensional. It's not just here taking place here. And when you get into things like monoatomic elements and different structures and monuments around the world, the energy points, the ley lines, the pyramids, all this stuff, it's like this energy web. You are essentially tapping into that in some way, shape, or form when you play with tools like this. You can obviously do it with other things that I'm pointing to my here in my heart. But there's something about this energy. And so when you compare it with like Alexander Golod's work, I mean, there was a couple of pyramids he built that I think it was they were refining oil underneath the earth, and like before they pulled it out and or extracted it. And so it's kind of like, well, what's the explanation of this? I'm not sure. But when I take that information and I compare it with, in Illinois there was this house, and you can look this up. It's a house that was shaped like, it's some guy, he built a pyramid house, and he gold leafed the house. And I know in
What's
the
that mean?
last, I put gold leaf around it. He literally, or gold, it's
Like
what
covered
is,
it or just a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit?
the house is essentially a thin layer of gold.
Oh, wow.
And so there's a different word than gold leaf, but it's escaping my mind. But anyway, so it's a pyramid, it's a Giza shaped pyramid, and it is encased with gold. And there was a moat, like a water moat that came up out of the ground around the house. And so when I hear about things like that, I then compare it to, again, like some of the work we're doing with these earth pipes, and how, the rest of the world hears that Arizona's on fire and the Southwest is in a drought. And, we need water. Everyone on this side of the country needs water, needs rain, more rain, but it's not as bad. I mean, it's sensationalized. It's not as bad as it's supposed to be. And they want everybody to be panicking and miserable. And they basically want you to think you've destroyed the earth when you haven't done anything. Something else is trying to destroy the earth. And I would tell people, like, when we go around gifting, I see a lot of trees that I'm like, wow, it's still green. Like, this looks amazing. There are a lot of areas around the state that still look phenomenal, that are still thriving. We still, last year, they took all of our monsoon season last year, and we still had a wildflower boom, and so did California. And it's that people forget that there is water under us. And I've mentioned this before in other podcasts, and this is a leap that some people will, maybe not agree with, but based on what I've seen with the connections to water and all this frequency stuff and where towers are located, I have a really strong gut feeling that, if there were ever a water shortage, that people should go to their nearest cell phone tower and start digging, because I personally think that there is water under, these are tapping into the water of the energy grid, because it's an amplifier, because it's a magnifier. Energy is a better conductor than gold, or excuse me, water is a better energy conductor than gold. And so, there's
So
no,
what would happen if you were to just like toss these in the water or in like a bay or a river, or if you're to bury it like literally in the water, one of these earth pipes?
I am going to say here, for my own sake, I'm going to say I don't recommend that people do that. There are certain types of resins that are safer, but you don't have to do that in order to be successful with it. You
Okay.
can bury some, or you can gift something at the beach, like the beach or the river, stream, lake, whatever. There are, I want to be very clear, and I probably should have led with this a little bit ago, just because since I've been had the privilege to talk to people lately, the question has come up more, and that is, you can always gift safely, you can always gift strategically, you can always gift, legally and lawfully. You don't have to trespass, you don't have to do anything bad. And I think a lot of people have that idea, like, because they'll enter an atmosphere, and they'll enter an environment, and they'll look around and be like, well, there's nowhere to do it except like right here, and then they give up. And it's like, no, once you start doing this, you're going to get really intuitive. And I tell people all the time, listen to your intuition about it, because you're going to get very creative. There's a lot of different things you can do, as far as, creating a grid and doing this in areas. I mean, one of the things is I never miss an opportunity to befriend somebody in this state, because, and I mean, I will play, based on what, if I get a good feeling about a group of people, or a person, or a business entity, whatever, I will get to know them, and I will, if they're like right by a tower, is what I'm saying. And sometimes you can, if you know people that are living right next to certain places, it's a lot easier and a lot safer and a lot more, it's just a lot easier to befriend them and gift them with this stuff, and show them how it works, show them what to do. And then it's like, okay, now it's not only is it gifted, but it's also safe. And so,
Well,
I
have the police ever
that's a
stopped a package, or have they ever questioned you and been like, "Is this a bomb?" Yeah.
so people, so okay, so this is another question that a lot of people ask it. And I had one the other day. She said, what do you do if, state authorities, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I know for myself, I'm not doing anything wrong, but I do occasionally get pictures from people. I will tell you, and I tell them this back when they text me pictures. I'm like, don't do that. And above anything, don't take pictures of it. That's stupid. But again, it's like you can do this safely, but that's something that you're kind of like the explanation of like what reactions you have to see. You have to do this yourself. It's like you have to get involved with it and do it yourself for that to make sense.
Well, have you had anything?
I will talk about that because you and I both have experience with that. And that is when and I've had this happen several times, where I send a package and it might get diverted. And it's funny because so I was on a podcast a couple weeks back and I made that comment. We were talking about the Georgia Guidestones, and obviously that's a huge energy generator, I pulsing with evil in my view.
I actually want
And
to talk about that for a moment here.
sure,
That when I went there, that was the most positive energy I've ever felt in my life. That
really.
there was no mosquitoes. We went hiking for 4 hours, 3, 4 hours, not one mosquito. I mean, we were deep in the woods. There's doing something there that is has the frequency. I mean, I felt like I was tripping balls when I got within 100 miles. The energy was so intense. It's such, I guess, a low point for heaven and a high point for earth that there's no negativity. Like it is so they keep it well, whatever they're doing,
Mm.
some kind of sound frequency. I don't know, some kind of maybe they have their own earth pipes, but there's something there that has it pumped full of positive energy. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no. So when I made the comment about, I said I would offer some of these tools to, an individual who was willing to go there and bury them. And, the reason too is because the guide stones are on the same ley line as a lot of tragedies that have happened in the US, like the Boston bombing and the Gulf oil spill and um, 9/11, Sandy Hook, things like that. And so, anyway, like I said, when you start playing with this stuff and you get in tune with a lot of energy, it's like it's not just busting towers. A lot of it is you're healing grid lines. Like they'll put churches and other structures up, energy conductors. They'll put things around to use, and it's like you.
Do you know what ley line that is?
I don't. I can find out for you.
Can,
Yeah.
we'll look it up. I was just saying. Sorry, you can
No,
continue.
yeah. So yeah, anyway, you had obviously reached out
Right.
through the grapevine. And so we talked and I put stuff together. And I know it was a short time frame. I think you had about 5 days before you were leaving, which,
Right.
it takes 2, 3 days to get there. And so I put stuff together, got it out the door right away. This was a Saturday and it was supposed to be there on Wednesday. And I think you were leaving Friday. And I looked up the tracking number because you're like, hey, I didn't get it yet. And it went directly from Sedona, Arizona to Anchorage, Alaska, which ironically is near where the original HARP facility is. And I don't care what anyone says. I know somebody was fucking with me.
Oh yeah.
But it was a compute. I mean, this is one of those things that I would just call it AI. I would call it, which I look at artificial intelligence as artificial consciousness. It has it's just a frequency that, we're an electrical body that we have this energetic soul, this essence of our life. And this is just the vessel. And in the same way, I think that that's my interpretation of
Yeah.
artificial intelligence.
I
That
think that I just want to add on that I think that the AI, like you're saying, is artificial intelligence. It's this place that we're in is an intelligent place. It's alive itself. It's a living matrix. It's of technology, and that's where all, excuse me, not technology. We often do this as society. We confuse the word technology with computers and robotics. Technology
Mhm.
is not computers and robotics. So I'll say this living simulation that we're in is a where computers and robotics come from. That's the idea was given to humans who were connecting with it by sacrificing other humans and doing all these other things that the what is we call Satan is just pretty much it's a computer program that oversees this entire thing because this entire thing is a holographic computer program in a sense.
I mean, I will say that I am not an expert on that. I have a lot of theories. Some I run with and some I don't. I have a lot of beliefs too. And I mean, in the case of that, most people think that the AI means like the Terminator movies. And it's like, no, it's not that. We know that. Um, I look at it kind of like how the pandemic happened. You know, a lot of people are changing the energy signature of this realm for the better, and something doesn't want that. And so I think in a lot of ways that's why everything kind of sped up. I wasn't expecting anything like Convid until like closer to 2030. I mean, I don't, I guess I can't say I knew exactly when, but it just seemed, and people that I associate with, people I talk to, and especially those who do the same work, uh, I think we were all kind of scratching our heads like, dang, this, like something happened to trigger and like speed a lot of this up, because it's like,
Mhm.
it's kind of like how you see people with the poison dart right now, and how there couldn't be a bigger push for that. I mean, a lottery to get it. And it's like, okay, they're running out of something, I think, is running out of time to do what it wants to do. And
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned before in other conversations that, you know, I think we're given a choice right now to have two different timelines, and that is the artificial one or the natural one. And you can tell who, you know, the natural one. And this is actually what brought up the Georgia Guidestones, because I, the more I have thought about it over the last maybe year, and especially in dealing with, you know, we've all dealt with Agent Smith, coming from the Matrix, for those of us that want to dissent and live freely and just, you know, embrace life. We're starting to realize like there's some sort of a possession or something that's taken over certain people. And it's made me kind of come to this idea that I think that the Guidestones, where it says that they're going to maintain humanity at 500 million, that we may actually already be there. I really do think we are already there, and that, you know, because they tell you everything in plain sight, that kind of thing. But I think that you're either human, or I think you are a person, and that person is essentially overrun by either a program, a parasite, or some form of artificial
Like an
intelligence.
overriding program. Yeah, and
Pretty
actually,
much.
I think with the Guidestones now, I mean, obviously, it could be that we're being told that there's 7.8 billion and there's not that many.
Yeah.
And it could be that we are under 500 million. I'm not suggesting that I know either way, but the reading that I get from the Guidestones was that it's more likely, okay, because so when I looked into the Guidestones, I found there was Muslim Islam had their conspiracy theories about the Guidestones in the area, and the Native
Hmm.
Americans have their own folklore as well. So these are two groups that, you know, aren't conspiracy theories. Okay, you got the Native Americans and you got the Muslims, and they're talking about this area. And the Native Americans, they call it the center of the world. It's right down the street. They have a plaque for it. It's called the center of the world because and what white people interpret it as is, oh, that's where the Native Americans, the Cherokees, would meet the white people from the north, and that's where they would conduct business. Like that's bullshit. That is, they think it's the center of the world because it is the center of the world. Because when you look at what I was talking about with the Muslims, is the Shiites specifically, uh, say that when the poles shift, that the new middle of the world will be the Georgia Guidestones, and the Georgia Guidestones are on top of a hill at the highest point in this area, and it's a very high area. Like I felt like we were touching heaven, like we were very, very high up in the air, and so I think that they were put in place back in 79 or 80 because they knew of an event that was upcoming that would wipe out more than what 7 billion people, because back then I think it was only like 7.2 or 7.1 billion back in 80. So I think they knew that there was going to be like 7 billion people wiped out, and that this is the new, these should be the new guidelines of which you run your world. And they are pretty good, actually, pretty good guidelines if you're going to start that see the thing is with how it gets interpreted with conspiracy theories is that we all assume that they're going to do something to us in order to get us there. But I think that they just know that something's going to happen because it happens every so often. Every 6,000 years, every 12,000 years, every 25,920 years. There's all these different events. And the keepers of our truths are the Freemasons. They are the hidden hand. They have created this false reality in which we live in, and they feel that we, especially the conspiracy theorists that don't like them, they feel that we are not showing that we're worthy of what they've done for us. They think that they've done this for us, that they think that they are God, that they are playing God, which they are because they are creating this false reality over the natural reality. As you were saying, it is the fake world versus the real world. And they have created all this the entire way. You look at the entire history of America, all the founding fathers, all Freemasons. I mean, it's everywhere. And the Shiite Muslims have a problem with Israel and America. Now, I'm not saying I have a problem with these, but this is just one thing I read that the Shiite Muslims think that their issue with Israel and America is that they're run by Freemasons. That's their issue, is that they're run by these people who are no good and they're trying to help the rest of the world. So if you look at it from that angle, how if the Middle East and the Muslim countries that surround Israel, if they have this idea that, oh, there are Freemasons running the world and we need to stop them because, our religious texts have told us, what to do. I don't read anything in Arabic. I don't speak Arabic. I couldn't communicate with anybody over there. All I'm told is that, oh, Muslims are crazy terrorists who go and blow people up and they've been fighting this religious war with Israel, and because Israel's all by itself, America has to come in and be the big hero. But then I look at history and I see Roman occupation. You see Roman soldiers everywhere. You have the British empires. You have British soldiers everywhere. You have the French. You have the Spanish. All these different time periods you have. And now what is it? It's the United States of America has soldiers everywhere. But we call it, oh, we're just helping everybody. We don't look at it that, oh, no, we're occupying. We are the terrorists occupying these forces. We're the Roman Empire. It moved from Rome to Britain to America. And this entire time, this population of people who have now adopted the religion of Islam have been trying to fight against this the entire time, and we've been brainwashed into thinking that they're the bad guys, and it's so the information I found out and from when before I went to the Guidestones to how I feel now about it is a complete 180, and I had no idea I would expect any of this. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to the Guidestones and fuck the Guidestones. But then I went there and I mean, it was not at all what I was expecting. I mean, I couldn't believe that there wasn't one mosquito in the woods. I mean, not one. We didn't wear any mosquito spray. She had on flip-flops and a dress, and we were actually like more dressed for the beach. And I had on like a tank top. Not one mosquito. Like there has to be, in order for that to happen, there has to be some kind of frequency to push them away. So they're doing something over there, or maybe it's just that that's a very heavenly spot. But my view has changed significantly in what I thought that the Guidestones were to what I feel that they are now.
I think that the energy of them might not be or what they're intended for. It's like there's energy structures all over the world that
Mm.
can be used for a positive or negative purpose. When I it wasn't that long ago, I was talking about the Chicago fire with somebody and going through the Chicago fire wasn't started by a cow, it was a reset. And the World's Fair, there was a book,
Mhm.
everybody was required reading if you lived in Chicago called Devil in the White City. And it never made sense to me. Of course, they turned it into a horror flick, kind of, or a, like a book, but it was like a horror movie, and a thriller that has this undertone of this psycho killer during the World's Fair and people traveling to Chicago for the World's Fair. But they built, the whole thing was about architecture. The man who essentially was responsible for the design of the city of Chicago as we know it today. And it was just, I was like, why would you build 150 of these like insanely ornate buildings just to destroy them after a month or two? And yeah, it never made sense. And then it's like, oh, it was more than likely it was remains of a civilization. It was,
Hmm.
it was a self-powered energy, like Nikola Tesla shit, basically.
Yeah,
It was just, and I would tell people, go read that book. I think Eric Larson is a history rewriter, but I already do now, but
like Quentin Tarantino.
or Ken Burns, the documentary guy, the PBS guy. It's like, and I used to watch all that shit, and I think,
Mm.
oh, this, I'm smart, just like I'm NPR listener, I'm smart.
Well, it's
Uh,
funny what you're saying with that World's Fair because there was so many different buildings and it was within three
yeah,
years and it's not just regular buildings. I mean, these were
yeah,
the same buildings that were the type that were in Rome. You know, these
yeah.
big massive churches with
I
these
mean,
big
yeah.
massive balls and mosques that still have it.
I mean,
And
the book passes it off as that they were made out of these materials that wouldn't withstand,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
It's
like
like,
it
no,
was
they're
cardboard. That's what
exactly
they
like
said. Yeah,
cardboard and plaster.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like,
plaster.
it was so stupid. And at the
Right.
time, you're like, oh, this is fascinating. Like, okay. And then they hose it all down and disintegrate. And it's like, no,
Well, do
just
you know about the gold rush in California? How
very
it's
little.
that well, it wasn't that they found gold, it's that they found from the mud floods, they found these homes and then they covered it with concrete and called it streets with San Francisco. That's why there's all this sloping streets. It's actually a mud flood that covered up a bunch of buildings. And if you look, New York City has it as well. If you look at all buildings in cities that really old ones, you'll see like a window right
Mhm.
like right at the concrete, and it's like you wouldn't do that unless there was ground there,
Mhm.
that the
Yeah.
house was built and then there was a mud flood and
Yeah.
then there was concrete put on top of it. And then they said it's a gold rush and everybody rushed out west and they told people it's the gold rush, so they had them looking for gold and people would say, "Oh, I struck rich," when it's actually like, "No, I uncovered this house with riches and that's how I struck rich."
I don't know what the
But they needed
technical,
servants, so they got them to
yeah.
come out and sift through the water of bullshit.
I don't know what the technical term for it is, but I think maybe it was Dan Levy, or I don't know if it's Levy or Levi. I know a lot of the somber voice guy. Uh, but he does a lot of YouTube videos on things like resets and lost culture, lost civilization.
Yeah,
And
Tartaria.
yeah, and there's a lot of evidence to show that frequency weapons are used to basically liquefy the rock and the dirt.
Mhm.
And it's interesting too. Just before we started talking today, I know there's some stuff going on with some earthquakes in California right now, and there's the fire. I think is it the oil and fire
In the Gulf
issue
of
in the Gulf?
Mexico.
Yeah, and it's just, and then you got the hurricane over there. You got the drought over here. They're going heavy with everything. Even the collapsed building in Florida, they just said it was because of
Oh
climate
yeah.
change.
And
It's
I
like,
just
no, it's
saw a
probably because of
video.
dynamite.
Yeah, I
But
saw a video of explosions happening
yeah,
lower in it.
I mean, like right now, my big, and to, I guess, bring it back to what I do know, at least when it comes to the orgonite stuff and the towers. Um, I see such an agenda ramped up. This started with as soon as the pandemic started, and they were installing the 5G at all the schools. I was getting a lot of emails, and I get a lot more than I think people would realize: phone calls, emails, and Instagram messages. And I try to talk to everybody. I try to give people the time of day whenever I can. And I was hearing the same thing from parents over and over again. And that was like, hey, Mitch, why am this tower showed up at my kid's school? And they were just finally starting to pay attention to all the stuff I'd been ranting about for the last few years. And the 5G network, I know it wasn't just here. It wasn't, Phoenix is a microwave. It's a literal microwave. That's why it's sometimes 117 degrees. But and it's also one of the targets or it's one of the locations we've been gifting so heavily. And there's just this huge ramp up with the climate agenda because they spent the last year convincing everyone to lock themselves inside because of whatever reason, the Wuhan wiggle. But now they're going to convince everybody that they need to stay inside because, driving is bad for the environment, gas is bad, oil is bad, all that, oh, we need to ration your water, even though it's abundant underneath of us. So much so that, like I mentioned a little bit ago, like it's kept a lot of this state a lot greener than people think. And it's just funny. Like people don't pay attention that it doesn't, like all the vegetation that's around, it doesn't all happen just because of rain. There's watersheds or aquifers, things like that are bringing water up. And there's a major agenda to control the water, but not even just to control the supply of it, to control the energy of it. Because even in the case of Chicago, which chi is in the name, but I mean the whole idea of they reversed the direction of the Chicago River leading to Lake Michigan. And it's like, don't tell me that that didn't have something to do with energy, because the rivers and streams and all that stuff is essentially a vein in the body that is the earth. And so it's like you mess around with this stuff. I mean, this is why I tell people, gift those water sources, and we've had a lot of success gifting around like Lake Michigan. I have a friend in Wisconsin who he's a heavy hitter when it comes to busting towers, but like he's seen a lot just because again the water is an energy conductor. I think it's one of the reasons they also put those Nexrad towers, those big ball towers, like way out in the ocean. Everybody's seen a couple of pictures of that. But we went to a hydroelectric plant over in Page and did some gifting, and it's interesting what you see, what you feel, what happens to the weather when you start transmuting these energy fields. And we in the case of it was Lake Powell, we went and gifted Lake Powell, which there was something eerie about it because it's a man-made lake, and it just, to me, it looks like a research facility, like a military research facility that's probably like under the water. And the Colorado River was dammed to basically fill it. And so we went and we did some heavy gifting around there. And then we ended up getting a massive snowstorm this winter, like within 48 hours of doing that. And of course, the media, every single time that there's snow, I mean, I tell people all the time, pay attention to how they present precipitation where you live. They will always try some way, shape, or form. They will always try to attach negative energy to it. When our drought ended, and this was within 6 months of living here, our average snowfall is 3 inches, and we went out gifting everything we could find when we got here. Again, it was November of 2018. Within 2 months, it was New Year's Eve 2018, and we got like 18 inches of snow here in Sedona. Flagstaff got like, I don't know, 30, 35. And then it happened again in February. And I know it was because it was all like us in such a short amount of time. They lost a lot of the functionality of what those towers are really doing. And they've since played catch up, I think, in expanding the 5G network the way that they have. And people ask me all the time too, like, oh, the 5G, they did this, they put it in town, whatever, and they're really worried about it. But I do want to remind people, none of these things were ever safe. And we've had them in our pockets for the last 2 decades, some longer than that. What we're seeing now, I think, in my view, is we are seeing the accumulation of the results of having this technology for this long. And essentially, it's just a bubble. It's why they want you to have the Bluetooth speaker and the Wi-Fi. They want you to have the Ring alarm clock that you and your spouse can now put a ring on that will vibrate different times so you don't wake each other up. It's like they are doing everything they can to get these EMF devices as close to your physical body as possible, because they're going to mess up everything. Not just It's not just about radiation and trying to cause, cancer or tumors inside. It's your energy field, it's your aura, it's your consciousness, and it's all about consciousness suppression. That's what these towers are doing. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so anyway, I don't, again, another tangent,
Yeah, no worries.
but yeah, so I guess what I think I was getting at is to gift those water sources, because they are such energy, they're just really good energy conductors. And I mean, it's kind of like when you're restructuring this water, like think of all the wildlife around there that's going to benefit from that too. The other day, we went up the canyon here and did some more heavy gifting. And we got what I would call probably our biggest monsoon since I've lived here for the last 3 years. And it was just like phenomenal. And to think, people ask me like, why would they stop the rain? Why would they stop the rain? I'm like, because it's the life cycle. Think about it. Like everything that hit, all the washes that run through here, all the animals that benefit from that, and just, we're on top of water. We have Montezuma as well, not far from here. Oak Creek that runs through seems like most of the state, but it runs through Sedona. I live in the village of Oak Creek, and it's such a, I would say it's a very high energy source. So much so that the government's been trying to turn Sedona into the whole thing into a national park and ban people from moving here. They've been trying for years, and unfortunately unsuccessfully. But it's like they want the land, they want the water, because they know it's all about energy, it's all about consciousness.
Yeah,
So
well, the Southwest, I mean, that was a heavily populated area by the Native Americans.
I think it
So,
was an oasis at one time. I
yeah,
really do.
yeah,
Because
that's what,
there's so many dried up areas too of things that you're just, when you see it, it's like you just, I don't know, when doing this work that I do, I look at things differently. And I'm not trying to sound, I don't hope that doesn't sound elitist to anybody. I'm just saying the way that I look at certain things, and other people do too, it's like there's something here. This is not what they say.
right. Why
Whatever
do the
story,
cartels run that area? Why are they
yeah.
allowed to?
Well, and why are people being driven away from it? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, Arizona's beautiful. I mean, I love living here. I'm very blessed to live here. It is a little bit dry in certain places, but other places are thriving. So it's like everywhere, really.
Right.
And there was a guy who, I mentioned his name earlier, Don Croft. I know he used to write about. There was this other guy. I'll find his name. You know what? I'll find this so you can put it in your show notes or something I can touch on my website. It was about positive changes. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who wrote these articles, but they were titled Positive Changes. And he would document things that were going on around the planet that nobody's paying attention to, like different species that are booming. I mean, I this is not to say that bees are abundant just because I see them, but I find it really funny that I hear people complain about the lack of bees, and I don't know how that's possible. When I go outside, and we have a fairly large perimeter around our house, and they're thousands and they're everywhere. So I don't know, what people are seeing. It's hard for
It's
me.
coin shortage. It's a bee shortage.
Well, yeah, yeah.
It's a wood
There's always
shortage.
there's always a
Toilet
shortage.
paper
Yeah,
shortage.
there's always a shortage, and eh,
Scarcity.
yeah, it's the idea of scarcity. Same thing with birds. People talk about the birds, and I'm like, good God Almighty, there are so many freaking birds
I see.
around our
I,
house.
I seen somebody talking about birds are fake, and that there's this website that's called like birdsaren'treal.com, and
Yeah.
the person sent it to me was dead serious, and I'm like, you like, it, I take it as that website is a joke, that they are messing with people, because it says like you have classic A-list celebrities such as, and then they list like two people like you heard of one time, and it's like the funniest thing. Like there's no way that that's not a fake website, and people would go for it. But
I mean, I don't put anything past I've seen weird stuff.
yeah, I'm sure that
I
there are
yeah,
drone that are
exactly.
shaped like
I
birds,
yeah,
but not all of them.
I think I was visited by what looked like a very like a prehistoric dinosaur-sized bee. I was on the driveway in Chicago making a chembuster. I think it was the second chembuster I ever made. And if you've ever made it, I will tell anybody. And I just got an email the other day about one somebody was building. They're like, "Hey, Mitch, I had a visit from the black helicopters." And I'm like, "All right, right on. Welcome to the club," because there's a lot of weird things that happen. And it's not to say they're bad. It's not to say they're even negative, but there's just these weird anomalies that go on because the world is not just three-dimensional that they say, and we're merging or transitioning or moving or whatever you want to call it. When people tell me, or an example, some people see chemtrails and some people don't. And the people that can are probably wondering, like, how in God's name do you not see that? And it's like, well, for the same reason they don't see that the mRNA crap in the poison dart is a bad thing.
Well,
And
what is a chem buster?
Chembuster. So if you know what, I just realized this whole time I can share the screen, can't I?
Yeah,
May
absolutely.
may if it's all right with you,
Yeah, I think
let me pull up a Chembuster here. These are the things that are based on Wilhelm Reich, his Cloudbuster. And he called it the space gun. Here's a pile of them here. Sorry, I just need to open this up with the right program. But the Chembuster it's like a tower thing. It's a giant bucket of orgonite that has crystals in each of these copper pipes that stick up, and they're about 6 feet tall. And here we go. Okay, so share screen. There we go. Can you see that?
yeah, it says you started. Okay, now I say, oh wow.
This was in my parents' backyard. When we moved here, I had to bring some across the country, and while we had a layover in Nebraska, I took those there. Coincidentally, we flooded out a Husker football game that weekend.
So
First
do
one
you
in,
keep
in
those
80
above
years.
ground?
You do, yeah. So I still have three of those. And then a couple of different models around the house, but I hide them in the trees around our house. And then actually last summer here, let me go ahead and,
Is that a bucket of resin?
oh, sorry. It is. So it's a mixture of resin and metal shavings. And then you take quartz crystals, quartz points, specifically these double terminated quartz points that are sitting down in the bottom base. So these are taller than they need to be. Again, I'm kind of a go big or go home person. I have made some chembusters. Can you see me? Is that right? Did I do that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So I've made some that are much taller. You can make them shorter, but the standard looks similar to that. We call that the Don Croft model. It's copper piping. It's roughly a 2-gallon bucket, and you can do it very simply, cost effectively with things like Bondo fiberglass resin and just machine shop. If you have a fabricator or anything like that, just the metal aluminum shavings. So
Are the
So
copper pipes filled? Mimi
the
has a
copper,
question for you.
yeah.
so are the copper pipes filled in there, or is that just the bucket is full?
Just the bucket. So we apply a little bit of pressure on the quartz points. There's different ways that a lot of people make these things, and I actually have on my website. There's a section under the Orgone tab, the Orgone Energy tab at the top. It will drop down and say tutorials, downloads, tutorials, and like instructions, I think. And so I have instructions in a PDF you can download or print out on how to make 3 different versions of the Chembuster. And I have made each of those 3 myself, but that one there that has the copper pipes and it's just a standard Doncroft model. We call it a sky cleaner. But what you do is you go bust the towers that are feeding this collective frequency fence, and then you start playing around with those and put them in different areas, and those will work more on the atmosphere. As a giant piece of orgonite, it's going to bust the towers that are around the vicinity anyway. But like you can pull, like if you aim a chembuster, like if you see a rain cloud, or if you have like rain clouds starting to form over you and you can see any blue sky, and this is based on actually this book, Contact with Space by Wilhelm Reich. What he did with his drawing storms in, you can aim a chembuster towards like wherever you see blue, and you can grow the clouds then over you. It will pull, because it's pulling orgone energy towards you, and then you're going to get a bigger cloud. And eventually that cloud is going to have to, well, in theory, it's going to have to burst, which is why, like, when the clouds start forming, like I said, pay attention to the sky, because you're going to see a lot of parasites, what we call them, coming out to do their thing. Whether, chemtrails, everyone says spraying. I have been guilty of saying that for years too. But the more I do this work, and I've been talking about this a little more openly lately, that there's more to this than aluminum, barium, and strontium. And I think we probably did talk about that a little bit on
I
the
think we
phone, didn't
touched
we?
on it a little bit, yeah.
So yeah, I just it's, there's a government side. You're allowed to, in this realm, it seems, look for who is bitching about what and who's censored about what. And one of the things that is not censored is the aluminum, barium, and strontium argument. That everyone is allowed to know about that. But if you start talking about the tower busting, just wait and watch what happens to those people that actually are really like driving home the frequency aspect of this. They're the one. I mean, I've been shadow banned on Instagram forever, and the only thing I now do to keep kind of under the radar is I actually throttle my followers. Like, if people aren't engaged at all, or I can tell, like, because I get a lot of trolls, shills, bots, everything. I've been through so much just nonsense, but I have my account on private because it's the only way I could get the algorithms to leave me alone. I can't use Facebook anymore. And I was shut down once by the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission when I had an Etsy shop. And there were a few people that happened to, and it was all people that were making orgonite correctly,
Wait,
because
who shut you down?
the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Etsy shut me, to be honest, like, Etsy
Right.
shut me down, but they sent me a letter that they got from the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission
And what
that
does
they,
that say?
basically, so if you read Reich's work, there's a component here about radiation, about nuclear energy, and it's a bit of a stretch for me to just come out and say, like, oh, orgone energy neutralizes radioactivity. But when you think about what it's doing around these towers, to me, it's not so far-fetched. It's there is an there in my view, I think there's two energies, or there may be more, but like, there's life energy and death energy, and they counter each other. And the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I know they know this. I know that's why they shut down people, is there are people that are making devices that are having an impact, as they said. We believe these products may be having some form of impact on nuclear research and some other bullshit. And it's very vague and very, like, it just exactly what you would expect from a government entity. And it just is what it is. And it was like, well, whatever, I'll just get my own website. And that's what I think everybody else that it happened to did too.
I
And
think
so,
that's super interesting.
well, I mean, it was one of those things that it's the weird stuff that happens. And I think people, when they hear about it, it catches them off guard, kind of like the black helicopters. This is not meant to be scary either, because it's all psychological. It's like, we live, like you've said, we live in the matrix, and it's everything is a psychological warfare, or energy
Mhm.
on, like, the consciousness stuff. It's all about just bringing down your life essence. And so you get these weird reactions to things. I mean, I've had what I would call visitors, I guess, or like entity, like where I know someone's around, something is around. I've had very weird things happen. I know people who've, back in the day, not so much lately, but people that kind of run off the road, I think, by people while they were gifting. uh People ask, like, aren't you worried about whatever? It's like, no, because the second you become worried about it, or that you give a shit, that's when you're going to have problems. It's like, no, it's like, no, you
Uh,
have no consent to my being. Get the fuck out. Pardon my
uh,
French.
no, you're fine. So I got a little story to tell you that I didn't say my end of what happened with the mail. So when you sent me the pack, it arrived the day after we had left. Like you said, it went straight to Anchorage, and then for whatever reason, it just for no reason went from Arizona to Alaska, then to Georgia. So I get there. We get to. I think I told you that we were going to have a mass meditation on the 3rd at 3:33, right?
Hmm.
And I couldn't do it because 24 bikers showed up at like 3:20, and then after the 24 bikers, about 3:25 or so, uh, two big SUVs like Suburbans pull up and pickup truck. I mean, it's a small parking lot, and
Hmm.
we went Friday, July 2nd at sunset. Nobody else was there. Someone pulled up as we were leaving, and the morning of July 4th on sunrise, we were the only ones there, uh, and we didn't have the orgonite because we didn't have it. But you know, you and I had spoken about where I was going to do this at, so the Matrix had known, and
Yeah.
if anybody was listening in, and I was openly mocking them by doing it at 3:33. So it was like it was I'll just say it was uncomfortable conditions, but and the motorcycle did follow us back to the hotel. So I didn't do the meditation. I was going to meditate in the car, and then I didn't because I was picking up. I'm telepathic, and certain times I don't know how or when I can use it. So it's not like I can always hear everybody what they're thinking, but it just happens when it happens. And I picked up from this lady. I got up because all these bikers are there all of a sudden. And I'm like, whoa, all of a sudden the vibe changed. And then I hear this guy saying, oh, that didn't take much. We drove all this way and it didn't even take much to do it. Like suggesting that to get me to leave, to not do what I was there to do. And they were all like kind
Yeah.
of celebrating. So then I was like, all right, I'll just meditate in the car. And the lady, she went off to by herself, and she was like, well, if you're really telepathic and if you can hear me, you'll leave now because they're not going to let you do it. Uh, and then, so I was like, all right, we're out of here. And that's
Mm.
when we leave. And then about 2 minutes down the road, no one's behind us or anything. Uh, and then like a minute down the road, like this big SUV is behind us, and I don't think anything of it. But then, like another like 10 seconds, I see this biker like going on the wrong side of the road, looking around the SUV, and I'm like, like what is this? So we just went back to the hotel. We weren't bothered by anybody. It wasn't anything other than, you know, our surroundings maybe making us a little uncomfortable in the moment. But it was, it very much felt like at least the Matrix set it up to stop me from doing what I was doing. And I do want to talk about what you're saying, the black helicopter showing up and unwanted visitors, or maybe just beings being around you. Is that, like I was saying, I'm a conduit. I'm a magnetic being. You can feel the magnetic energy in my hands. I can do it to anybody. I could put my hands up to you and you can feel the energy coming off of me. You can do it with my feet. You can feel it with my forehead, or not the forehead, the top of my head. My whole star body is completely magnetic. And the star body is, the star chakra is the eighth chakra, and then your hands and your feet, that your 5 points. So I'm completely like lit up, and anyone can feel it at any time. That's something that I can show on demand. Well, I'm a very powerful meditator in that I can affect my physical environment. I don't know how I'm doing it when I do it, but I'll meditate. I'll just use this for example, is that I meditated one time and I concentrated really hard on, well, it's not even that I concentrated more than I normally do, but and a light beam shot down to Earth and killed this reptile. And at the same time, my bedroom light, the electricity in my bedroom popped, and just like right at the same time that I'm seeing it with my eyes closed, I see a flash of light, and so bright that I turned to look, and I was like, "Oh, it's nothing," because as soon as I opened my eyes, it was dark again. So I was like, "Oh, well, that was weird," I saw that light was really bright in my meditation, and my girlfriend tells me later on, she goes, "Oh, no, the electric, popped in just our bedroom." And then another time I was meditating, and I was pushing out, uh, what I would say was, Satan was being kicked out of heaven, and he was coming out of my head. I was pushing him out of my head, and he was gripping on, and it was like, my head was a concrete pad that was becoming so smooth you couldn't hold on to anything any longer. Like he was on the sides
Mm,
here holding on. And then once this part raised up and he couldn't grab on, he slid down. And as soon as that happened, a big tree branch smacked the roof of the shed that I was meditating under, like a huge one. And it was like, I thought that a human had fell. I was like, because that's what I saw in my meditation was a human was being kicked out of heaven, and then this tree. It was like so I connected to the tree. So I'm a very powerful meditator in that I can connect with the physical environment.
mm,
And often I wake up at 3:30 in the morning for work, and I'll go meditate about 4:30, and we are kind of close to a military base here, but usually you don't have any activity that time of day. But sometimes I will start picking up. I'll start physically hearing uh, vehicles, air vehicles. Maybe it's a helicopter, maybe it's a plane. I'm not sure. I'm meditating, so I can't be precise with what it is. But then I'm picking up people talking to each other, and they're getting readings, and they're wondering, what the energy is, like what's
mhm,
creating this energy field. So I could see that if you start making one of those chembuster things, that all of a sudden they're going to be picking up on, oh, let's go check that out. What's that?
mhm.
We're getting this reading. We need to go have further discussion. And it's not that they'll ever come up to you guys, but maybe they're going to be watching from a distance. We don't know the technology that they have. I mean, what you and I are doing right now on Zoom, they were doing this 60 years ago. It's a Space Odyssey 2001. I mean, they're having video chats in that. So, you know, what they have nowadays, I have no idea what the Matrix has given them, the privilege of seeing. And so I very very much feel that I connect with a lot of what you're saying, and that it is an energy thing, it is a frequency thing, because I'm doing my own energy stuff, my own frequency stuff, just with me as being the conduit, and you're using this copper and orgonite as the conduit, and we're both having the same results. And now I have these things, these earth pipes and tower busters that I've been carrying a tower buster around in my pocket the last 2 days, and I feel differently when little annoyances pop up. I'm just like,
Mhm.
I let it go easier. It's like it's not gripping me in the same way, and the whole thing with the organ, I feel like it's really strong. That there's really something to it.
You know, one of the first reactions I had in Chicago playing with it was, or using it, um, was reactions with people. And I think, to kind of circle back around to my comments about like when you're explaining this to some people, and like when I've said, some people don't make it correctly, there's also a lot of people, they make certain claims about it. Like I agree 100% in any of the reactions you've described so far. I think that a lot of these things, these gifts that people have, these are tools, but essentially we are life energy. We are life energy generators, and the goal, I will say, is eventually like we won't need these tools, because I've found like what I was mentioning about the ether damming before with the things like my staff, where we have things we call power wands, and you hook this up to a frequency generator, and there's stuff in here. You have to go on my website. It's too convoluted to explain, but basically it's like you do these things, but they get easier and easier, and you have bigger and bigger reactions. You can do things like build medicine wheels. Those will also those will transmute a lot of the energy coming off of these towers too. And some people,
What are they called?
medicine wheels, like you build medicine wheels out of like rocks. I don't have an example of one, but
I gotta start building shit.
like a Native American medicine wheel. I mean, even just
Oh,
rocks on the
okay.
ground. Yeah. So it's because you're using the energy that is already here and figuring out a way to concentrate it, harness it, and redirect it, or transmute it if it's of an energy that you think needs to be transmuted. And so, but the idea is like essentially we shouldn't need tools like this right now. In my view, I believe we do. I really think we do, because we have so many of these weapons that are being used against the collective to bastardize these energy fields. There's even if you look at Austin, Texas, I listened to this woman, her name's Emily Moyer, and she lives in Austin, and she talks a lot about the architecture of Austin. And there's been a lot of pyramid shaped buildings going up in downtown Austin, and there's some really weird just
What,
stories that make
recently?
recently. Yeah, the whole story. I mean, I think even and Elon Musk, I think, wrote a check or something to pay for the city of Austin. Like he's the honorary mayor. Maybe I heard that wrong, but I think he like paid the city of Austin like to buy the city. But buildings themselves have these energy
I'm gonna
signatures,
look
and
that up.
and are being used. It has something to do with his recent condo too, I think. I told some folks they should go and gift that as well. Which, by the way, to circle back actually to the Guidestones, some people, I can hear the voice already from a very specific woman who would be like, why would you tell anybody that you're going to gift the Guidestones? Well, when I did the interview where I was talking about this, I'm like, I'm not obviously going to Georgia anytime soon. So I was like, well, let's see who. I don't know anybody in Georgia. I obviously do now. I know several people in Georgia, you included. And regardless of what had happened, and I'm not going to go into detail here, but you learn, because of the reactions, because of the visits from Mr. Smith, you learn to plan ahead. And it's like, yeah, I mentioned that, or we had our conversation. There's other people who went and successfully gifted the Georgia Guidestones. So I'm not really worried about it. Because it's like yours is the one we talked about, and the one that we had the incident, and the one that we now have this story about the Alaska package and whatnot. And so it's like, and I didn't know that this was going to happen exactly this way, but as soon as I saw it, I started laughing, because I'm like, of course, like, of course this was going to happen. And so you just plan ahead. And it's so there were a handful of people, and there were actually a few people I think that it might have even worked out better, just because they were probably, well, I don't know how in tune they are with energy, but and I know it's not a pissing contest, but as far as what you've mentioned with your ability to tune into a lot of this stuff, it's like they might have seen, maybe they would have seen you coming better than somebody else. So they knew, so it's just like whatever. But
They had a
I,
psychic spy on me
oh no,
when
yeah,
I
and
got
that's not
within,
surprising.
yeah, within exactly 33 miles of the hotel. I got this image. My third eye is very active, and I got this image in my brain. It was a woman. She opened her eyes suddenly and said, "He's almost here." I didn't know I was almost 33 miles away, because, or exactly 33 miles away. It was that there was a sign that said Elberton 34 miles away, and then I look at my GPS, and my GPS says 33 miles to the hotel. So it was like, you know,
Huh.
like someone, like, obviously it had to be 33 too, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny about there's a guy that I follow named Tony Sayers, who talks a lot of he talked recently about the moon. He talks about a lot of new age deceptions, and just like he's just somebody I've gravitated toward. And one of the things he was talking about recently was the moon, and there was this book he recommended that I just got it and I need to read it still, but it's called Who Built the Moon? And he talked a little bit about it. But that there was like people who were trying to like remote view. It's like there's this thing with the moon if you're trying to remote view. I'm not an expert on this, to anyone who's wondering. I'm just saying something I heard. But that for people who have tried to remote view to what is the moon or what is on it, or if there is even an on it to be, that they get blocked, that there are these entities in the world. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there's black ops projects where they hire literal psychics, or they have,
Mhm.
someone who's created in a laboratory underground. I mean, God only knows what's
And I would
the extent,
anyone listening, I would recommend against remote viewing. Period. Because of what my abilities. I only want to say this because it's come up in my personal life recently. Is that I see people encouraging people to remote view, and I will
Mhm.
tell you, do not do it. I have abilities that I haven't even barely began to scratch the surface of. And I can do things to people and I can make them not wake up again. Not again, but I can hold their consciousness so that they cannot return to their human vessel. And if I can do that and I don't know what I'm doing, then these don't do it is what I'm suggesting. Don't remote view. You have to be a professional. You have to know what you're doing. So don't just start remote viewing just because it's really cool. It is really cool, and it's part of the reason why I got into all this stuff. But it is very dangerous at this time.
That's everything you just said does not shock me one bit. So, and because essentially you're anything you open yourself up to, and that's why like
Hmm.
we do certain things to take precautions when we gift. If you're somebody who gifts a lot of orgonite, you probably have come across the tool we use called the sucker punch. It's a certain type of coil. It's a quartz crystal that has a certain type of a knot that is fed with a 15 hertz generator, a 15 hertz zapper pulsar, and you slap a battery on it and it creates a chaotic energy field around the crystal. We carry that. A lot of orgonite folk will say, it's like a cloaking device. It doesn't mean, and it's not an end all be all, and it's not like gonna make you completely invincible to any psychic attack or anything like that, but it's gonna help. It's gonna help in the moment. It's throwing certain things off, because like if you gift with somebody else, for example, like it's really interesting. Over the years we've gotten a lot better. Me and my counterpart, we've gotten very strategic, and just like we do these things, we go out, we do them, we're done, that's end of subject, and for the most part fairly calm. But in the early stages, it's like there were times where it's like you might be out gifting and you have to really be focused, because if you're coming close to frequency tech that is meant to do the very thing you're there to undo, they're gonna
Hmm.
try to, you're gonna wonder, like basically like the second you're getting ready to gift something, why does everyone come out of their house all of a sudden? Everywhere there's a dog walker, everywhere there's a nanny, everywhere there's a homeless person, everywhere there's I just people, lots and lots of people. But what's
Hmm.
funny to me over the years I've learned is, especially in Chicago where it was, busy, busy central, is people are so non-observant and glued to their phones, and they're glued to their matrix, that in a very unfortunate but roundabout way, you can use that to your advantage. That there are,
Hmm.
because some people wonder too, they're like, you mean to tell me that you can just do this XYZ? And it's like, yeah, it really is that easy, because unfortunately, some people, like I said, humans and people, some people are just that stupid. And it's like,
Hmm.
or non-observant, or brainwashed, or brain dead at this point. And so yeah, I mean, sometimes it really is that easy, but you can use certain tools. And you also want to like you want to live by what you're doing. Uh, maybe sounds like it's too simplistic, but you eat well, take care of yourself. You do all of the things you would do to enhance your consciousness and be a well-rounded, healthy mind, body, and spirit. And so, if you're not that type, I wouldn't recommend getting into orgonite gifting, because it's a lot of work, and it's not just a lot of physical work; it's a lot of mental work. So, Like you
Yeah.
said, don't remote view. It's like you're open. I mean, I don't want to discourage anybody. And I think in some of what we've talked about, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh no, now I can't, like I'm terrified. And it's like, that's not what this is about. It's not so much that it's terrifying. It's that there's just weird things that happen. And it's like, well, where are you on the level of understanding just how weird the realm is in which you live? And if you're, because there are some people that are still, I know people who have been jabbed that think the idea of orgonite is like cool, like, oh, I want to help. And I'm like, you are the last person on earth I would ever ask to help for your own safety and for my own sanity, because I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be associated with those type of activities with those types of people. It's not, there's a time and a place, and it's like, if you're not there, you're not there, and that's fine. So just, yeah, like I want the world to gift. I want the world to like get an earth pipe or make an earth pipe and bury it in your yard. Start in your home, start in your community, get with your, I know a woman in Phoenix, for example, again, we've been really hammering home the gifting in Phoenix. I have made several friends there that I send just boxes and boxes of these earth pipes. And they're a little bit more bare bones because it's incredibly expensive. So for those ones, I make hundreds of these. These are aluminum casing. They still work, but because earth pipes take quite a long time, I up them for the ones that I sell. Those are copper. But I send people these earth pipes, and I'm like, give them to anyone you trust, or anyone you like, but friends and family, and just start establishing a grid. And I know people down there right now at this point, we've been doing this now very heavily since January of this year. And, it's one of the reasons that, the monsoon season is coming back. It's one of the reasons we had a lot of heavy rain in the month of June, and it's why our fires were put out. And so, yeah, anyway, it's just, start start small. Like, don't feel like you have to make 100 tower busters and go out and save your city. It's like, just start small. I started with 6 tower busters that I bought from a person I found on Etsy, that I looked at theirs, and I based on Don Croft's work and a million other of these resources. I mean, all I was doing was just consuming so much information from all these different outlets that had different experiences with orgonite. But I trusted this guy's work, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get a couple of these. I got like a 6-pack, and we took them out, and it was like, let's just do the towers that are within, a mile of us or whatever, or however long they lasted. And then the 6 turned into 6 more. And then I was like, okay, well, let's get a dozen. And then it was like, okay, let's buy like 20. Then it was like, okay, this is kind of expensive, so let's make them ourselves. And so that's what I started doing. And it just, you just kind of start in the middle and work your way out. And then but the reactions we were seeing in the sky, we had certain like moon cycles and astrological events that normally were always chemtrailed over, or had that DOR electric smog, and you could see it all breaking down. You could see things opening up. You could see puffy cauliflower shaped cirrus clouds on a regular basis. Then the moisture started coming back. And then it got really fun once we gifted enough of the city of Chicago. The meteorologist, there's this woman, I used to do this thing every morning on my way to work. I would get up in the morning, I would record the forecast. It was my favorite meteorologist, Tracy Butler, Miss Helmet Head. And she was running out of talking points, and you could see where the scripts were being used because the forecast wasn't matching what was really going on. And I was using it as an opportunity to, like, I would add captions about what we did versus then what happened to the forecast, where like one week it says 10-day forecast of like super hot, super dry, and it's like, oh gee, it's gone down a collective of 10 degrees and it's wet as hell, or wet, it's just wet. And, we had like first it was the wettest April, then it was the wettest May on record, then it was the coldest June on record, then it was the foliage was lasting through to the fall, into the fall, almost to Christmas. And, I remember sitting on an airplane once on the way home it was on our first trip back from Costa Rica, and some woman going back to Chicago was bitching, where the hell is our summer? It's so freaking cold here. And I didn't tell her, but I was just kind of like, the temperature is not what you think it is. It's not what you think it is. Once you take out, or once you gift these devices around these energy sources and these, what I call weapons, everything starts to change. So, and there's a reason too. I always say why they plaster the words "We're your weather authority" on the bottom of the screen when you're watching the
Hmm,
forecast,
that's interesting.
because everything's been chosen and they are the weather
Yeah.
authority. It's all that information comes from Weather Central. And if you do the digging, it's just like the Federal Reserve and everything. There's this and the banking families, and above that, and it just keeps going. Well, all
Okay.
those entities, they all lead to the same, they all lead up the same pyramid. And it's like that's where these people get this information from. And
Okay.
so that information is no longer accurate when Mother Nature takes over the weather, because the weather, I don't believe, in my view, I do not believe that the weather can actually really be predicted if it's left alone. I think that I think that the world is more than likely a very mild place that is lush and is wet and cool, and that everything can just thrive. And that the idea of the deserts and the extreme heat and all of that, I don't buy any of it as natural at this point, doing what I've done. So
I think Mimi's got a question here for
yeah.
you.
I've got several questions. Most of mine have to do with making these pipes. What is the difference between the copper and the aluminum, or is it just
So
one's
it's
copper, one's aluminum?
yeah. So okay. So one thing I'll say is, first off, the pipes for me take me quite a bit of time. They're very labor intensive. The reason I make two kinds is because when I started gifting as much as I was
Mm.
doing, I found that the aluminum was still working. And then after talking with other orgone workers, and this includes like people that have been doing this for the last decade or more, um, any metal pipe, any metal pipe, and when you drive that into the ground, it's working with the Earth's conductivity, and it's just any metal pipe. The only pipe I would
And
probably, yeah.
and you're just filling them with the
So
metal shavings and resin.
yeah, so what we do first is you cut it to size. There is no set size for an earth pipe, but most people, what I've seen is usually anywhere from 10 to 12 inches. I go with 11 for the ones that I have on my shop that are in copper. And then because Arizona is so rocky and they're a little bit, I mean, they're harder to bury. I mean, when you're hammering something in, or sometimes you get very creative with huge drill bits that are the same size. I saw someone else do that down in Phoenix. My friend Trent was doing that. And so I had to get one for myself, but it makes it a lot easier. But so they're shorter is the point I'm getting at, is some of them we make shorter, but you cut your pipes how you want, and then you just cap an end with tape. I use duct tape because it'll seal with, the resin can't leak through. And then you just get a bunch of them, stack them together so they, you hold them up in a cup or in a whatever. Just I wrap a wire around mine. They all kind of self-stand. And then you mix together your resin and your metal components into basically a sludge. Like a really, I in my website, for using this method for tower busters, I call it the milkshake method. You're basically stirring this stuff together until it's as thick as like a gloppy milkshake. And so you mix this together. And the reason you can see in these they're black is because they have shungite and they have different types of metal powders that just happen to be black. You do not have to use metal powders, but because the space inside you're limited, there's not, I mean, it's very thin, and you don't want to use something like this or you'll kill your budget. But we use metal powders because in my experience, and I know other people doing this work too, using metal powders does enhance the device a little bit, if not a lot. I'm not quite sure. I couldn't measure it. We just know that they still work. And so anyway, you mix this stuff, you pour it in, and then you start to add crystal points. And those crystal points, you would add them like this. Here, I've got a couple. So like, I mean, something like this, and it would be facing upward,
Mhm.
up the pipe. And so because then when you're done with it and it's hardened and it's cured, they get buried like this. So the crystal point is now facing downward into the ground. So some of the pipes, like the aluminum ones that I make, because I mean, I think I just this week made like my 600th one for what we've gifted around here, around Arizona specifically. And they get very, I mean, like I said, they can be very expensive. So we try to limit how much, wherever I can cut back on them, I try, while still making sure they're functional. But the ones like and I'm sure you probably noticed the one that you got, the copper one was quite a bit heavier. There's extra bells and whistles. There's a lot of extra bells and whistles, and there's 3 quartz points. They're all wrapped in
3,
copper.
okay.
I mean, we do all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, like everybody kind of has their own thing. Everyone gets intuitive and creative with it. And like I said, it's my big thing is like, I want people, if you're going to take the time to make this stuff, make it right. Put in enough metal. Like here's a pyramid that has, the bottom half of it, like that is enough metal. The bottom black band that you see, that's all black metal powder. And then the next layer above that, that's all aluminum. And I think it's black mica powder. And then I just keep the crystals at the top. And oh yeah, there's a crystal point
Yeah,
there in
I'm
the
very
side too.
interested in making these.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to,
Fun fact, I used to be a machinist, so I have some access to some metal shavings.
Right on.
A good chunk of metal shavings. So that would be the easy part for me.
That stuff's gonna be like gold. I've done videos since January, ever since well, basically since prices have been going up, because right now I'd say the copper, specifically the copper I use, is about 3 times the price that it was back in October. So it's definitely going up, and I've been trying to nudge people like, hey, if you're on the fence about wanting to do this, or because I get so many emails where people will say, I'm just waiting for that payday, or I'm, like I just need, just whatever. I comprehend what they're saying, but I kind of had to use a cattle prod and say, that day is not really coming. And I was very lucky when I started, given I had a very lucrative position for what I call my matrix job, that I had both the finance and the time, where I just spent 8 hours a day researching when I should have been doing other things. And then I'd go take 2-hour lunch breaks and go gift the Chicago Loop, because there was no shortage of towers in downtown Chicago that needed to be gifted. And so now things are a little bit different. I don't have those same luxuries, but the cost of things is going up, and like everything, it's going up fairly quickly. So yeah, that stuff's going to be gold for you basically in the apocalypse. So
Yeah, that'll definitely be awesome. So I just want to touch on a couple of things real quick before we wrap up.
yeah.
That Elon Musk thing, it was a April Fool's joke from the Austin Chronicles, but
Uh,
truth in plain sight maybe. But they did buy his boring company, bought land in Austin. But yeah, maybe it's real. I don't know.
We'll look up I don't know much about because I had heard too. All I heard was that he wrote a check and that somebody was saying
Yeah,
he should be mayor or something.
it was April
Um,
Fool's Day.
okay. Oh, see, I didn't even notice that. I
Yeah,
read this maybe 2
it's
weeks ago, because we were trying, what we were
yeah.
really looking for was the location of a building that he recently bought in
Oh,
Austin,
okay.
that's on a very significant river that was featured in this episode, that I forget what she names her show, but her name's Emily Moyer, and she talks a lot about Austin, and there are some episodes about architecture, and it's just interesting, like with Austin being, AU and being the
Gold.
for gold. It just there's just a lot of weird coincidences,
Yeah.
and it just kind of leaves you scratching your head, especially like I said, when you dabble in any of this stuff, that stuff stands out to you. And
Yeah,
so
and he's a complete AI bot himself anyway.
I have my
His
opinions.
this is what I got in meditation is that he's completely AI, and that his child is the first child that is born from AI and human, because the mom is human. So it's the first synthetic or biological AI, I guess, is his child.
That sounds gross
Yeah.
to me. I have
Yeah.
no other word for it other than, I'm like, I don't want that world. That's not my world.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a new age spiritual bypassing type of way. I mean, like, I don't, yeah, no, this is why I do what I do, is I'm like, I want the natural world. I want I want the trees, I want the rain, I want living off of the land. And I don't mean that in a woo woo way. It's like we can have everything we've ever wanted and this world will give it to us. And
Well,
also the
I,
I have to also just say too, to anybody in regards to our conversations about the stuff that's happened or people we encounter, when you're taking care of the world, when you're taking care of Mother Nature, nature will take care of you. And
absolutely.
so, yeah, so it's just like to the people that inevitably somebody will always ask, aren't you worried about whatever? It's like, no, I'm not. And I'm not for that reason. So, like, that's
Mhm.
just keep that in mind when
Yeah,
you get involved with this kind of stuff.
well, that's perfect. And that's a great segue into what the next thing I wanted to touch on that I forgot earlier was it was you were talking about the aluminum, the barium, uh, with the chemtrails. And
Mhm.
I actually channeled information. It was the first time that I ever channeled information the way that I did, in that there was like a 5 to 7 second delay, and Mimi was asking me questions, and I was thinking it, and then like I would sit there and we'd be quiet, like I was in a trance, but it was quiet for like 5 to 7 seconds, and she would get ready to start answering or asking another question, and then I would start answering. So it was like a big lag time, but it was talking through me and it was moving my mouth, and I've never had that happen before. So I briefly mentioned it in one of my episodes, but I wasn't comfortable with talking about it then. But now I think I'll talk about it. Is that she was asking about the planes. She was asking, why would people do this to their families, their friends? Why would people do this to people? And the answer I got is that they're not, that it's not people doing this, that it's the Matrix, that these planes have always been around. That if you look into Ancient Aliens, they're real big on this and showing the little trinkets of in South America and Africa, little golden planes that they would make. And that is why we made planes the shape that we made them, is because we already saw them in our sky, because what is being sprayed is essentially it's the projection. It's uh, it's as if, so the way it was translated to me was, if you take a bubble, you're in a plastic bubble, and that you have wallpaper up over this bubble, but when this bubble dries, or when the wallpaper dries up, then it falls down. So you need to spray uh, something to keep it there, like an adhesive sort of. And but it's not just that, but it gives the atmosphere the uh, it creates the vessel for the projector screen to actually project onto. Like if you were to take a projector screen and put it outside, it's not just going to be in the ether. It needs something to grasp onto. Well, that's what the chemtrails are. Is that it's the projection of the skies and whatever. I didn't get into exactly what was being projected, but that's it's being projected onto that. That's
Mhm.
the vessel for the projection to be onto. That it's actually like holding up our fake atmosphere, and that it's always been there. Because that's how this place operates. Is that it has to take care of itself, and like you were just saying with Mother Nature, like it has to take care of itself. But this lays on top of Mother Nature, so it's a weird thing, but that's what I that's what I got with the planes, is that it's not chemtrails, it's not people, it has nothing to do with the aluminum and the barium and whatever, but it's actually, and that's why they let you talk about it, but it's actually the frequency, so that it can spread in the sky, and then you can have something shoot a projection on there so that you can see the projection, so you can see the projected sun, the projected moon, the projected sky, all that stuff.
I mean, there was another common question people ask is the one you just said, like, why would people do this? Why would people do this to their families? And my one day, I don't know, it just came to me. And I said, the way I said it, I said, what makes you think that there's a human inside of that, let alone that that's a real plane?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah, there's
because,
nothing in it.
yeah, and again, like I said in the beginning, go to my website and look at what happens to these trails, because when you've busted towers, I have so many videos of the sky that, and I also have a page on my site called Best of Chemtrails. You can tell a lot of them are holograms. You can tell a lot of them are something else. But it's just, it's like, this doesn't make any sense with that aluminum, barium, and strontium thing. On the flip side, I will be very clear that yes, I agree that the government tests and experiments and does all kinds of nefarious shit. But the thing is that no one has ever followed these planes and taken samples of that. Every time I hear someone talk about samples, they're like, oh, well, we got samples in the water, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, in the water that could easily have had a boat drive through
Right.
and somebody dump stuff or pump stuff, or God knows what's under the water. Like,
And I will say that I've seen from my own vision, and I'd have to look through my phone to find this, but me and my daughter, before we moved from Philly, see now in Georgia they don't spray very much. Maybe they do in Savannah, probably in Atlanta, but where I am they don't spray all that much. But I used to live right outside of Philly, and last year, me and my daughter witnessed. We're outside on our little balcony, and there's a big old cloud, a weird cloud, and we witnessed 3 planes of those planes leave out of the cloud at the same moment in 3 different trajectories. That there, one went to the left, one went straight up, and one went to the right. And I mean, it was, we just watched it. And not only that, but like a couple days before that, we saw a cloud. I was eating dinner and I saw a cloud just appear out of nowhere. Like there was nothing. And
mhm.
then it started appearing. And I'm just sitting there watching it. And I'm like, I tell my daughter, I'm like, Maya, look at that. And she could see it. And then it would go away. And then it
Mhm.
would come back. And then it would go away. And then it would come back. It was like they were, something was trying to come in, something, somehow these clouds were forming right in front of my face, and then like 3 4 days later we see the 3 planes escape from that one cloud.
You know, the stuff that manifests, I don't know if, I mean, I know we're kind of, I don't want to run you out of the clock, but if you have time for like a 15 to 20-second time
Yeah,
lapse
go ahead.
video,
Yeah, go ahead.
here, let me show you this. This is an example of the DOR that basically manifests. Okay, sorry. Is it plain? Here, sorry. I'm like so terrible at this.
Don't worry about it.
How do I go? Oh, here we go. Okay. Can you see this
Yeah,
video?
yeah.
I want to make it bigger.
Oh, I got pictures of sun dogs as well.
So here we go. This was a time lapse. Watch how it forms over the sun. It comes out of nowhere. It's like they harness, the sky was primarily blue, but like this thing here, it's like reflective, rainbow, fiery, whatever, but it just keeps coming off of that one spot. And that was a day they had all this energy directed at trying to cover the sun up. And this happens all the time. And people don't realize, if they're not looking up or they aren't aware of the attempts that are made to cover the sun. But this stuff, it just can, and you can see the lines, the wavy lines in that, just right there on the right side. Do you see these lines in there?
Wait, are you playing the video now? We're not seeing a video
Oh,
playing.
oh shoot.
We're
I'm
just seeing
sorry.
the screen is just
Well, I'm
up.
sorry. Here, let me redo this. Um, okay, so let me start that again. I'm sorry. So
No,
you
no
didn't see
worries.
any of that?
No, yeah, I thought you
Oh,
were just setting
oh
it up
man, I'm
for
sorry.
us.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Don't worry
Uh,
about it.
okay. Okay. There's I just have, when I hit share, it gives me the option. Now it does. Okay. There we go. Now can you see it?
Okay, yeah, now we got it.
So watch the sun and this stuff that just continues to form over the sun. The rest of the sky was mostly blue, but there's that weird white stuff to the right. But watch, it starts forming over the sun right now, and it just comes out of nowhere. And it's like it just starts there, but then it moves out of the way because like it's just a constant sky battle that there's a frequency trying to cover it up, and it couldn't that day. I think the energy, in my view, the energy was too high that day. This was just a few months ago, but I uh, was trying to show just that this stuff it manifests out of nothing. It's the frequency fence, and see there on the right side, it's kind of hard to see, but there's some microwave lines there right here. Do you see that?
Okay, the little ribs.
Yeah, they're like ripples.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, everything is just a frequency web. Some people they're like, they think something is worse than something else as far as one tower over another, but I'm like, everything is essentially just being used to make the web. It's just the fence. And so, that's
Well,
why
it's
it's
funny. I
important.
got pictures of the grid.
I mean, I just say
then the night
bust.
sky.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, when you watch the sky, which a lot of people don't, it's just, sunrise and sunset, they're always strategically blocked. And they're actually now, I think the attempts are getting more prominent to block sunrise and sunset during prime sun gazing hours. Watch where the weird haze, even on the most crystal clear days that you have, watch what happens starting around like 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Look at the sky and look at the placement of where you see the fake clouds or you see the white stuff just sort of come out of nowhere. And then it's just slowly it will start to migrate towards wherever the sun is heading as it goes. Same thing with new moons and full moons. It's like
Yeah.
there's lots of astrological
Well,
stuff. And
they definitely do it more in cities, I've noticed, because I go, I'm a truck driver and I go to different, rural areas a lot. And it's clear as day, or clouds are huge and fluffy, and you can really, you can really see what they are.
yeah.
You can tell the difference between a thin cloud that looks like it's spread too thin and it's not moving versus big fluffy clouds. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a real difference.
You can see a lot of that electric smog too, moving in directions that go against the wind. Like the wind has nothing to do with the placement of clouds and doesn't blow things out of the way. But sometimes too, I mean, I have videos on my website that show like, the sun will be here and there's stuff coming this way, stuff coming this way, stuff coming this way. And it's all just like, it's like trying as hard as it can to get to the sun, and it's slowly disintegrating because I think there's not a strong enough bubble in that. It's because it always happens, especially just middle of the day directly over the house. There's 6 chembusters here aimed up at the sky, but the attempts, it's like watch how that stuff moves, and it's trippy. It's not natural, and I try to get people to pay attention to it, and those that do, sometimes they're just like, that's weird, but I'm like, that doesn't make you stop and wonder, like, why would they? Why? Well, then look at what sun gazing does. Look at what we get from the energy. It's like it's not just vitamin D, it's the consciousness, it's the frequency, it's all the life force and everything. It's not just water, but the sun is a huge component, which is why they want to
Block
cover
out
it
the
up.
sun.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they want to project their own,
Their
especially
own.
over cities where you have these large buildings that are conducting
Yep.
and all types of nefarious stuff. The last thing that I wanted to say was earlier we were talking about Chicago and the great and the World's Fair and all that. If you if you go on edgeofwonder.tv, there is it's $10 a month. You got to pay for it, but there's a show on there by Benjamin Tales. It's called Clown World, and he does an episode on the World's Fairs. And there's this map from the 1800s before the Chicago fire that has the Mississippi River that goes all the way up to Chicago, but this is pre-America, the way it is now, and it's actually called Chilaga, or Chilaga. That it was Native Americans lived there, and that Tartaria was from Native Americans. That portion of it anyway. So you, I couldn't
It-
remember the name of it. I looked it up and I
yeah.
couldn't find the name of it, but then I remember it was Chilaga.
It's interesting. I've seen that name, going to the whatever it is, the cultural arts center, whatever tours you go on and
Mm,
whatever. I have come across that name, but that's not the story that they tell.
yeah.
So it's usually just like Native Americans and then white people, and we just had our own, like, oh, we found a name close enough and translated it and it's left it there. That's it.
Yeah,
It's
so
stupid.
I Googled it, Chilaga, and the first thing that comes up from Chicago Tribune is long lost Chilaga, the Camelot of Chicago. So I guess Chicago.
Hmm.
Yeah, here's the map right here. Oh,
I wonder how many people are
uh,
actually
here,
reading it and taking it seriously.
here, I'll share the screen real quick so that you can see it. All right, can you see it?
Hmm.
Say Chilaga right here. I mean, that's pretty pretty amazing. Was this Nova Scotia, Canada? France was owned here, but this is where Chicago would be.
And,
Yeah, I said the Mississippi. I guess I was way off on that. I thought that I remembered it being the Mississippi, but whatever.
well, I mean, I've wondered, it was always an interesting party conversation, I think, for people that visited, where you're like, oh yeah, or you go on the boat tour, that was always popular. And it's like, oh yeah, they changed the direction of the river, and then nobody ever stopped to think about it. But it's like
They
doing,
changed the direction of the river.
yeah, it runs the opposite way now. And so like all the sewage runs. And so instead of polluting Lake Michigan, it goes down. I forget where to,
How do
somewhere.
you change the course of a river?
I have no idea, but it's
Probably a lot of copper.
well, they make it sound like a bunch of people digging. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things
Mm.
that you hear about it, and at the time it creeped me out just because the river is disgusting and the idea of being in it and under it, and it just sounds horrifying to me. Kind of have a water phobia in that sense, but yeah, no, they changed the direction, the flow. They changed the flow of it, and I'm sure that had to be energy. I mean, people can say I'm making conjecture or whatever, but I think it's because of energy flow. I feel like every decision that's ever made, I got into this because I started learning about the Federal Reserve, which taught me about energy and manipulation and all of that. And then I got into this. And so it's like, it helped answer the question of why every decision in history has ever been made the way that it was made. And it's like, people think it's about money. They think it's about politics. They think it's about all these things. And it's like, screw that. It's no, even right now, what's going on with the pandemic, it's all energy. The fire going on right now, the earthquake going on right now, the trust the plan and that whole
Let
thing.
me let me talk about that fire real quick because you did bring
Yeah,
that up. Do you know of the U.S. Navy's 40,000 pound bomb that they dropped uh, in the ocean? And I mean, it's all over the news. You can find it anywhere.
I can't think of the last time I turned my TV on, and I'm trying my best to
Or
stay to. I
I
mean,
mean,
I don't
like
know if
it's a
that's a good
mainstream thing.
excuse, but
No,
I
no,
just
but I just mean anyone out there can. That's not a conspiracy theory.
I'm ignorant to it. I know nothing
Okay,
about it.
so the
So
U.S. Navy on June 21st, they, for whatever reason, they decided to do this, and it's on Twitter. And I mean, this is a real thing that they tested, quote unquote, tested a 40,000 pound bomb. And then what proceeds to happen is now the ocean's on fire. Okay, and not only that, but there's a mud explosion or volcano explosion or a mud volcano explosion somewhere else off in the ocean like a few days later, and people are just speculating that maybe something was killed, Godzilla versus
nothing. I mean, I know I feel the more you learn, the less you know at this
Mhm,
point in this game. And so it's just like we do what we can to learn and get out of the
mhm.
matrix. But like nothing on earth will ever surprise me at this point moving forward. I would not be surprised. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised. And I've wondered because of that stupid movie that came out a couple years ago, whatever. I think they, something about Titans and all these creatures that I think
Oh yeah, the
Godzilla had to.
Titans. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm like,
we're the
when I,
Olympians. That's the funny part.
okay. Well, when I saw that, I didn't see the movie, but I saw enough of the clips and whatever, and I'm like, are they saying something about
Mhm.
creatures? Because you hear about the giants and the weird remains. I mean, like I said, everything used to be big. There were a lot of large creatures at one time on this planet,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, and that it doesn't. I mean, and I know nothing more than that to really to make an
Yeah, well,
educated
my
guess.
my girlfriend and I, we saw Godzilla vs Kong in theaters,
Hmm.
and well, not in theaters, in a drive-in theater, and we saw it was the Mortal Kombat tournament. It was a double feature, and it was awesome. But here you got on the screen, I have the 40,000 pound bomb. I mean, that would take out some of that. Like, and I get it's like a communication when I'm meditating, telling me that the humans are the Olympians,
Hmm.
and that we're going to take down the Titans. And then this type of stuff's happening, and it's like, are they the Titans? I mean, let's see
I
if we
wonder if
look.
it could be allegorical, like if they're doing some sort of
No.
ritual to do it.
Well, I mean, as above, so below with everything. Like, I take that to it's very literal that, the
Yeah.
universe, I am the universe. Like, there's a version of me that is so massive that all of this fits inside of me and it all correlates to my body. And I can, you know, physically point out things outside of in the external world. I'm like, oh, that's my liver. And oh, there's well, I'll say this, that there's a lot of weird stuff going on. BBC UK emailed me asking me if I wanted to do an interview because my name was Todd Armstrong. They just happened to email the wrong person. The woman, she is an editor, and she's in London, but I think it's Brazil's uh, like branch. I forget, but it's Brazilian news. Well, there's this
Huh.
guy named Todd Armstrong who bought this 752-pound emerald that is allegedly cursed and it's worth millions of dollars. And she wanted to interview him about that. And I'm like, oh, that's my heart chakra. You know, someone
Weird.
with my namesake has a huge emerald chakra or a 752-pound emerald, and the heart chakra is an emerald. It's emerald green, and they have my namesake, and I know that I am the universe. So it's everything is quite literally as above, so below. So when they say titans, they are probably doing some ritual to bring them up from out of the depths, whatever that means. But you
Very
know,
interesting. I just heard recently, I was watching a clip from one of those terrible new Star Wars films, and there was a group of people in their ships or whatever in a battle, and they said, "What is that?" And some guy goes, "Oh, that's a navy." And I was like, "Oh, how
do you
funny."
see that?
I Oh man. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's for the most positive of all intentions. It's such a
Yeah,
shit show. I
that's like some crazy, crazy stuff.
I mean,
Look at.
like you mentioned too with the guide stones earlier, everything, I know everything can have a signature, and I know there's people doing grid work all over the world. There's people that talk to this or talk to that. They have these gifts and those. It's like this is just my specific, I'm doing my contribution of what I believe is, the right thing for me to do. And there's ways to transmute this energy, like seeing that bomb detonate. I'm like, oh yeah, man, what I would give to have a boat. Like Don Croft used to take a boat out into the middle of bodies of water, and he had there was one time he thinks that they made him crash his plane. I think he made earth pipes
Oh,
out of like plane parts, like missile type shape things that would go into the water, strategically hit the ground in the lake or whatever, wherever he was. And just gridding around bodies of water. It's like obviously these things are coveted by them. It's like they're important to us too for the same reason. It's the energy of it. And it's just kind of like oil. And, you know, everybody, the reason orgonite works is because it's an organic compound. It's derived from oil, and people have their qualms about orgonite being, you know, the resin component. And I'm like, whatever, I always tell people, get over it. Like the trade-off is you're destroying the towers. That's the point. Some people hate it because of the plastic component, but it's like the earth is giving us a gift and we need to use it. And yeah, I just know in the last year, there's been a huge uptick in the anti-resin brigade. It's just more of the deception and the things like people come across, and the infighting, and just anything to get people to make the orgonite incorrectly. So,
Yeah.
but
Oh, all right. Well, let me stop doing this. That's too much BS. I was trying to get the mud
that's crazy.
explosion.
I'm gonna do that tonight. I got a little free time tonight after this, so I'm gonna I want to know more about that. Because I knew nothing about that. I'm shocked that no one said a word to me. But I mean, I don't know. I've been a little recluse lately, I guess.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, I think that's everything. So usually my episodes are focused about the guest and how they've healed themselves, and what they're doing. But you're healing the earth, and I think this episode is perfect on uh, on the succession of topics that I've been doing lately. It's just right in a row, perfect timing as always. And you're really out there doing, like, you didn't even know this stuff. You're deep into conspiracy theories, and you didn't even know, this crazy stuff happening because you're so out there doing the work that needs to be done. You're helping nature, and I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
I mean, I like to think of it as, there's another orgonite person who he's been doing this for years and years. And one day he said, I'd like to think that the work I was doing helped you to wake up. And I thought, because I was in the soup of Chicago when I had my time around like 2012. And I'd like to think that he had an influence on the frequency web that was affecting me. And with all the consciousness stuff, it's like I want to restore the weather. I want to help. If it's true, I do believe it is helping certain people who need that nudge. Everyone's going to wake up when they're supposed to, or they already are. And I imagine most people watching this, you're ahead of the game. But I'd like to think that, just my motivation is just heal the earth, and heal it to whatever extent I'm supposed to. I feel like I have a ways to go, and then hopefully I get out. So
Yeah.
that's just my only I'm like, something's telling me, and like my role is do this. You came here to do this, and then get out. And I look forward to that. So
Oh, it's the get out. Okay, so I'm
yeah.
glad you brought that back up. So you are legally taking steps to get out,
Mm.
right?
Yes, I will say the same thing I mentioned before. Just there's a thing all I can tell people is to do some research on something called the assumed name certificate that has to do with removing yourself from the legal fiction entity, because everything is commerce and everything is business, and what you are on paper is essentially a business entity. So you can remove yourself from that. And I am not an expert. Don't email me asking me questions. I have to say that, like, don't anyone who sees this is don't ask me a question. Like, look up the assumed name certificate, and start there, because I can't answer things or won't answer things that I shouldn't be. But basically, you're removing yourself and you're becoming the human being that is the life entity that becomes the name holder for that business or for that commerce aspect of your name. And so it's a whole can of worms that I mean, I know everybody's like, you do this to be sovereign, or you renounce a birth certificate, or there's so
So
many
what does
different
that do for
methods.
you?
It removes you from essentially from the legal aspect of as a body, as your physical human form. Um
So are you
Again,
no longer under the law? Can
I
you?
I'll be really, I'm gonna have to say it again. Like, I think the best thing is people have to go research it, because I
Okay.
don't know enough about it, and I don't ever want to lead. I'd feel terrible if I let anybody into something that got them in trouble with the law. And so I know people are renouncing their birth certificates. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I know some people are also becoming
Well, I meant
a citizen.
does that free you from American laws, like is being a sovereign being?
You become in the smallest explanation, it's you are following God's law, because it's all fiction.
Mhm.
There is no law, except it's basically do no harm but take no shit. It's, you don't kill, or you don't infringe on the life and livelihood of others. There's more to it than that, but start with looking up the assumed name certificate, because it's really about, like, right now you're tied to doing business as this
Mhm.
fiction, and that is where the majority of the bullshit comes from. And so
Mhm.
there's different methods I've heard. I talked to a guy on the phone a couple weeks ago. The stories he told me, I was just like, I don't even want to say, like, what he said he doesn't do now, what he doesn't practice, as that the rest of the world seems to practice. It's just a non-resident alien. I think that's a term that comes up a lot too. Instead of being an American citizen, you don't want to be a citizen of a country, basically. You want to become like a or a national or non-resident alien, those types of things. I mean, if you look up the word non-resident alien, I've read that in some books that were about the straw man and that kind of stuff. I don't like that term straw man, but it they were basically saying, like, it's a term. The non-resident alien term is meant to trick you into thinking, like, well, you're an alien, you're obviously don't belong here. And it's like, it's deeper than that, and it's actually the opposite. Everything's the opposite of what they say. But as far as what I do and what I'm practicing and what I have taken steps, like, I'm still in the middle of my steps to do this, and that is the route via the assumed name certificate. So I would tell people, if you were interested in that, go look up the assumed name certificate. um and yeah, like, yeah, but I just can't answer questions. I don't want to, and that's why
Right.
I can
Okay.
tell I'm stumbling over my words, because I'm just like, I don't
Mm.
want anyone to get in trouble on my account.
Okay.
So
Yeah, well, I will definitely look into that. It's
yeah.
just it's been coming into my life, and I watched a movie not too long ago. I think it was a cartoon, and the way that the person it was Never Ending Story. The Never Ending
Mm.
Story. You see that? Well, the
Long time ago, but yeah.
yeah, but at the end of the movie, the kid, all he has to do is give the Empress a new name,
Hmm.
and then she she changes. Then she's safe. So, very symbolic. All I have to do is give Mimi a new name, and it'll all be okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're gonna see, the good news is that there are so many people doing all these things, or at least now asking the questions, because the poison dart, or for other reasons, kids and
Yeah,
homeschooling and all that. So
right.
there's more people than ever that people aren't alone when they pick one of these paths to pursue. So
Mhm.
there is that benefit, because until recently there was no information about any of it. But I'm like, yeah, I wish I was an expert already, and I'm not. It's so convoluted, and it's meant to be.
Mhm.
So I know people that do all kinds of things on how to keep all 100% of their money, and how you can do this with money or this with money. And it boggles the mind, but I'm
Well,
just
any
not.
lawyers out there, hit me up.
Funny enough, though, I don't know. I would tell you, a lawyer is an officer of the state. That's one thing I've learned. And
Oh,
you're choosing to participate in a legal system when you get
okay.
a lawyer. That's not
Yeah,
legal advice, and that's not a diss. I know, I have friends that are lawyers, but I'm just saying that you always have to ask the question, who's representing you?
that's
And
a good point.
there's no motivation for the individual human being to be saved by the state when you get a state officer to defend you. So
Yeah.
it's
And it's funny that all the laws and all of the medicines and all of the diseases are all written in Latin, and then they make Latin a dead language.
Yep.
Like, oh, they don't want you to know it.
Yep.
Why?
Any headline, it's funny. I tell people, go take any headline and start playing around with Latin and Hebrew. and translating them back to English. Just play around with like Google Translate for a while and do that. And it's like there's a lot of so many, you'll become a coincidence theorist overnight.
Yeah, I've been learning Greek for the last about a month now, and I've been learning Spanish for about 3 years almost. And I see the world in a very different way, and just how speaking those languages,
Mhm.
it's balanced me. Speaking Spanish has actually balanced me into becoming more feminine. And now the Greek, I find it's so funny because Greek words, not all of them, but the ones that I've learned so far, a lot of them sound, they're English words. Mango is mango, avocado is avocado. It sounds so very similar. Coffee is cafes, you
Mhm.
know, and but then you look at how it's written, the symbols that are used, and it's like this looks like Poseidon was here, that has
Yeah.
a trident for a letter, and I don't even know the names of the letters, which is funny, but I know how to spell it in English, and I'm like, I'm explaining it to my girlfriend. I'm like, yeah, P's sound like R's, and what makes the P sound is the pi symbol. The symbol for pi is
Mhm.
makes a P. It's so funny. Like upside down Y's make the L sound, regular Y's make the G sound, and it's like, man, they just perverted
Mhm.
everything. So in English, it's this magical language that spelling,
People,
sentencing.
yeah, a lot of people, I know everyone uses understand instead of the word understand. I actually like to use the word comprehend whenever for
Yeah,
the
that's a good
original.
one.
It's because I spoke
Entiente.
Spanish. I thought like comprende. And
Yeah,
I'm like, well,
comprende.
why do they use that word? And I forget in Italian, it's very similar, but it's just like, yeah, or intende. Yeah, like intender. It's, yeah, it's just, it's not your,
Mm,
we know what understand means. And so,
right.
I always try to say I comprehend.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Potato,
Yeah.
potato. Oh wait, no, that's not true because actually one of them is like a curse that curses you when you use it wrong. The whole spell thing.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
know. Yeah, the etymology of English. Actually, I think this will be a good thing to close it out. Elon Musk tweeted out yesterday that he was listening to a podcast on the history of English. And I would recommend that anybody out there listens to a podcast about the history of English, and you'll quickly find out that it is magic.
wow.
Uh, Do you have any final words that you want to impart on the audience? And do you want to let them know where they can find you?
Yeah. So obviously my website, you can go to my website, theorgonedonor.com. I would love for people to go and take a look at my Earth Pipes Across Arizona project. For the last year, since basically the pandemic, I have put, I actually gifted a whole bunch of chem busters last summer, in a very like, just a very large project. But you can see all the work I've been doing, the people I've been communicating with, a lot of the results. I do try to blog every day. I do summaries of that in my Instagram form, but I prefer to write bigger material. And so, yeah, just check out my website, look at what I'm doing. You can go to my shop. If you want to purchase anything, I'm one of those people that like, I mean it when I say it, that, any sale from my shop, it helps me to do this work. It's the only way I could do
I bet you
this,
spend a lot of
honestly.
money.
I have, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I mean, we're talking a life savings and it's a lot of work. It's just, and I've chosen to do it. So I know people probably think like, well, then stop bitching about it. I'm not bitching, but it's just a lot of work. So if you
Right.
go there, take a look, learn a little bit more about it. If you're interested in getting involved, like I just would love more people out there doing this work. If you want to buy something from the shop, you can go on there or reach out to me. I have recently asked for, or I shouldn't say asked, but I made the option. I finally was like, okay, my ego's not too inflated. And you can, if you want to make a donation to my work, I'm not going to say no to that, especially people in Arizona or people who benefit from it. or people who have gotten like some free stuff from me. Like I try to give away a lot of stuff in like the orders I do. I mean, I make sure my name stands by itself. It's called, I'm the Orgone donor. So, you know, I'd be a hypocrite if I wasn't in fact doing that. So anyway, aside from that, yeah, just go to my website, learn some stuff, reach out to me, and I'd love to hear from you.
And I just want to say thank you so much for everything you gifted me. I mean, and you gifted it under the premise that I was going to go to the Guidestones. I didn't get in time, but I do got a little surprise for you. But before I reveal the surprise, I really want to thank you for that. You took a lot of time and care, and I'm sure the shipping was $15 each at least.
It wasn't that bad. They sent it somewhere that I didn't pay for, and that's
Uh,
that's the funny part.
yeah.
So,
But I can tell there's a lot of care in what you're doing. And as soon as we connected, I'm so glad it was Morgan Engel is the one who turned me on to you on Lindsay Sharman's show. And I'm so glad that she did, because you're a really good guy, and I can tell you really care about the earth, and you spending a life savings. And it's not that you necessarily care about it, as you're saying, but the earth knows that that's your stored energy that you're choosing to spend on the earth. So the earth will repay you, and I mean, it probably is already, but
yeah.
has been, but you'll be definitely rewarded.
Oh, and I do see that. I appreciate you saying that, and I'm immensely thankful for the ability to talk about these things, and especially because a lot of people don't want to. So it's just, yeah, it's great because it gets that message out there. It clears up some misconceptions, and like you've mentioned today, like there's a lot we hear about these topics, but then you don't hear certain things because, you know, it's like we're allowed to hear certain stuff about whatever. So any opportunity to talk about it, I'm eternally thankful. So I love doing what I do. I love doing what I do. It's
Well,
it's rewarding. So
that's the best part about life, is doing what you love to do.
yeah.
And so the little reveal I have for you is I'm actually going up to Philly in 2 weeks. I'm going to pick up my daughter, and along my way, I'm going to make a stop
Wait, do we want to
somewhere.
know? Do we want to know? I don't
No,
think
I'm
we want
not
to
going to say
know.
where. I'm not going to say when. But I'm going to make a stop along the way somewhere, and it is going to be worth it. Let's
I
just.
I can tell. I think I just got I got that feel, you
I'll
know.
let you know
So,
afterwards.
oh yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad. I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear.
Yeah. So that big old fat one that you
Yeah,
sent, that one's going to go to real good use.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, if you
Here
ever
it is. If anyone's watching.
people see different shapes, it's like sometimes, you know, you make things shorter, but then you accommodate for it by making it fatter, so you get just as much or more
Oh, that
material in
thing's
it.
like good,
So
like 10 to
it's a
15
brick.
pounds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's heavy. Well, there's some stuff in there. There's
That breaks someone's face.
other can of worms, but there's other tech toys in there as well. So they're
Awesome.
meant to do well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I can't wait to see what the effects are.
right on.
All right. Well, I think that does it. And I will, of course, have all your information in the show notes. And again, thank you for coming on and killing it. Well, we spent 3 hours here basically. And, this was a great conversation. So I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
And to the audience, everybody, have a good night, and we will see you later.
All right.
Bye.